Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into the Milky Way itself, not as explorers racing across it, but as wanderers learning why we will likely never leave it. Yet, within that truth lies something unexpectedly gentle, that our boundaries can become our belonging. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into the Milky Way together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. When you step outside on a clear night and look up, you might notice a faint silver band stretching across the darkness. It's easy to mistake it for a cloud or a smudge of mist. But that haze is our home. That soft river of light is the Milky Way, a vast spiral galaxy with hundreds of billions of stars, each shining quietly across unimaginable distances. The ancients once thought it was the spilled milk of gods, or a bridge to the afterlife. Today, we know it as a grand disk of light and dust, almost 100,000 light-years wide, gently spinning through the dark. But no matter how much we've learned, it still feels deeply personal, like a long breath drawn in by the universe itself. If you could rise above the galaxy and see it from afar, you'd notice something familiar and intimate, the way the spiral arms curl outward, as if the Milky Way were holding itself in a slow, eternal embrace. Our sun sits about halfway from the centre, on the edge of one of those curling arms, drifting through space at hundreds of kilometres every second. Yet we never feel the motion. To us, the world seems still. We wake up, pour coffee, step into sunlight, unaware that we're gliding through a sea of stars. And that's the first quiet wonder of this story, how enormous motion can feel like peace. You might imagine, though, that with all our curiosity, one day we'll go beyond, that humanity will build ships capable of crossing the great void, travelling not only to the next star, but to the next galaxy, perhaps meeting others who gaze back at us from the same darkness. It's a dream woven into every story we tell about space. But here's the gentle truth. We will almost certainly never leave the Milky Way. Not in 1,000 years, not in 1,000,000, not ever. The universe has surrounded us not with walls of stone or metal, but with boundaries made of distance, time, and the unbending fabric of physics itself. That might sound tragic, as if we were locked inside a cosmic cage. But tonight, we'll see it differently. The Milky Way isn't a prison. It's a sanctuary. The walls that keep us here are also the arms that hold us. If you could travel outward for billions of years, you'd find that the further you go, the faster everything else runs away. Space itself stretches. It's not that galaxies are flying through emptiness. It's that the emptiness itself is growing between them. Imagine a rising loaf of bread dotted with raisins. As the dough expands, the raisins move apart, not because they're travelling through the dough, but because the dough itself is stretching. That's our universe, always expanding, always stretching the spaces between galaxies a little wider. And so, as time goes on, the Milky Way becomes its own small island, surrounded by an ocean that grows faster than any ship could ever sail. Someday, billions of years from now, the night sky will darken. The other galaxies will fade, their light stretched and slowed until it disappears beyond our cosmic horizon. Future astronomers, living among our descendants, will look up and see only the Milky Way, floating alone in silence. They will not know that other galaxies ever existed, unless we leave them the memory of our time now, when the universe is still visible, still open, still luminous. If we could pause the expansion, if we could sail across it, we might try to reach our nearest neighbour, the Andromeda Galaxy. It sits about 2.5 million light-years away. The light that leaves Andromeda tonight will not reach us until long after the continents shift, after the stars we see today are gone. When that light first began its journey, our ancestors were using stone tools, carving their first sparks of thought against the darkness. Every time you look at Andromeda, you're looking into deep memory. Not the memory of humanity, but of the universe itself. It's a reminder that light is both messenger and time machine. It carries news from a past so ancient that it feels like myth. And yet, for all this wonder, that same light is also a quiet confession. It tells us that space is not built for crossing easily. Even if we could move as fast as light, it would take millions of years to reach Andromeda, and light, as far as we know, cannot be surpassed. It's not a limitation of technology or imagination, it's the rhythm of existence itself. The faster something moves, the more energy it demands, and the more time bends around it, until motion and time trade places. Somewhere near the edge of that speed, the energy cost becomes infinite, not just large, but impossible. And so, the dream of leaving our galaxy fades gently into the background hum of reality. But perhaps this isn't something to mourn. Perhaps the real wonder lies in the fact that within this single galaxy, this one spiral of stars, there are hundreds of billions of suns, billions of worlds, and countless mysteries that no civilization could ever finish exploring. The Milky Way alone could fill all of human history and still leave us with new skies to discover. In that light, our confinement becomes a gift. We are not trapped in the Milky Way. We are held within it. We are part of its slow, spiraling song. So tonight, as we begin this journey, think of yourself not as a prisoner of space, but as a child of it, born into the arms of a galaxy that will cradle you for all of time. Somewhere out there, stars are being born, others are dying, and between them lies the thin thread of everything we are. If we follow that thread a little further, it will lead us into the vastness of distance, into the quiet realization that space is not just empty, but expanding. And within that expansion, we'll begin to understand the true shape of our cosmic home. If we follow the thread a little further, it leads us into the vast open space between stars, where distance stops, being something we can measure in steps or miles and begins to feel more like silence itself. It's easy to forget that light, though impossibly fast, is still not instant. It has to travel, to move through time just as we do, only much more gracefully. The light you see when you look up tonight began its journey long ago. Some of the stars above you might already be gone, their light still crossing the darkness to tell you what once was. In that way, the night sky is not a window, but a collection of memories. Every glittering point is a message sent ages ago, finally arriving to whisper, "I was here." When we speak of a light year, it can sound abstract, a cold unit, too large to feel. But imagine this instead. If light were a traveller walking beside you, it would cover 300,000 kilometres every second, faster than any thought could keep up with. Yet even at that incredible pace, the nearest star beyond our sun would still be 4 years away. Andromeda, the great spiral neighbour we dream of reaching, sits 2.5 million years down that same road. If light itself were a messenger, it would have to travel across all of human prehistory, through ice ages, through the birth of language and art before its journey ended. That's the kind of scale we're speaking of, a scale where even light seems to grow tired. Astronomers try to give us ways to imagine this, but our minds are built for smaller rooms. When you measure distance by footsteps, anything beyond a horizon feels infinite. Multiply that horizon by millions, and what you get is not understanding, but awe. It's the same feeling you might have standing at the edge of an ocean at night, unable to see the other shore. Except this ocean has no waves, no salt and no bottom, just the faint shimmer of distant suns across the dark water of time. Our galaxy, the Milky Way itself, is enormous beyond comfort. From one edge to the other, it spans roughly 100,000 light-years, meaning that if you could move at light speed, it would still take you 100,000 years to cross the disk. That's 20 times longer than all of recorded human history. And yet, compared to the distances between galaxies, that span is a mere ripple. The universe arranges its creations like islands separated by vast seas of nothingness. Galaxies travel in clusters, drawn together by gravity, but beyond those clusters, emptiness reigns. The farther we look, the thinner everything becomes, until matter itself seems to fade into the cold fabric of space. There's a quiet comfort in knowing that we live in one of those rare oases, a cosmic city surrounded by billions of others, though all too far to visit. The nearest one, Andromeda, moves toward us, and one day, billions of years from now, it will merge with the Milky Way in a slow, silent dance. No cataclysm, no fiery crash, just stars weaving through stars like two ghosts embracing. For a time, their lights will mingle, and a new galaxy will be born. The story of that meeting is already written in motion, though none of us will be here to see it. But that's the poetry of it. We're not meant to see everything. We are meant to glimpse enough to know that there's always more. Beyond Andromeda, most other galaxies are running away from us. Not because of some great explosion pushing them apart, but because the fabric of space itself is stretching. Imagine drawing dots on a balloon, then slowly inflating it. The dots don't move across the surface. The surface itself grows, carrying them apart. The same happens in the universe. The galaxies don't sail through a cosmic sea. They're passengers on the expanding tide of reality, and the farther away they are, the faster they drift. At great enough distances, they move faster than light, not because they break any law, but because space itself carries them. We can never reach them. They're already gone, even as their light still tries to reach us. That idea can feel strange, that space can stretch faster than light can cross it. But physics allows it, and the sky confirms it. The most distant galaxies we can see today, their light began travelling over 13 billion years ago. In that time, the universe has grown so much that those galaxies are now more than 30 billion light-years away. Their light still travels toward us, a gentle wave from a time when the universe was young and full of stars just being born. By the time their light arrives, we see them not as they are, but as they were. A ghostly echo of youth across an aging cosmos. It means that even as we build better telescopes, we are also looking into deeper history. The farther we see, the older the story becomes. The edge of what we can see is not a wall but a boundary drawn by time. Beyond it, light hasn't had enough time to reach us since the beginning of everything. That edge is called the cosmic horizon, the furthest limit of what any observer can ever see. It's not a fence or a barrier, just the moment where the universe runs out of messages to send. One day, far in the future, that horizon will shrink in all directions. The universe's expansion is accelerating, driven by what we call dark energy, a gentle, unseen pressure that pushes galaxies apart faster and faster. As it continues, galaxies beyond our local group, our small cluster that includes the Milky Way, Andromeda, and a few dozen dwarfs, will fade beyond sight. Future astronomers, no matter how clever, will look out and see only our merged galaxy, surrounded by blackness. To them, the universe will seem small and eternal. They will never know there were once trillions of galaxies sparkling across the sky. The evidence of the Big Bang will be gone, the cosmic background faded into undetectable whispers. The universe, in its vastness, will have folded in on itself through silence. But right now, in this brief window of cosmic history, we can still see it, still know the truth of the larger world beyond our own spiral arms. We are living at a special time, balance between the chaos of the early universe and the solitude of its later years. We can still read the light from other galaxies, still trace the filaments of the cosmic web that connect them. We are, for now, witnesses to the universe while it's still telling its story. And that makes our moment precious. So when you look up tonight and see that soft band of the Milky Way arching overhead, remember that it's not just beautiful. It's a miracle of visibility, a whisper from the wider cosmos before it slips beyond reach. We don't need to leave our galaxy to find meaning. We only need to look closely and gently at what surrounds us now. From here, the story opens into the laws that hold us in place, the soft but absolute rule that light itself sets the rhythm of our motion, and that time, in its quiet way, bends to that rhythm too. The path now carries us toward one of the most quietly astonishing truths of all, that the universe is not standing still. Every point of light you see in the sky tonight is part of a grand, slow motion that has been unfolding since time began. Space itself is stretching, a silent breath that has never once been drawn in. It is not that the galaxies are rushing through the dark, it is that the dark between them is growing. Every moment the fabric of reality lengthens by the smallest fraction, so small that it means nothing to a single human life. But across billions of years, those fractions build into oceans of separation and galaxies that once shared a sky drift so far apart they can no longer see one another. The first people to notice this were not dreamers looking through telescopes for beauty. They were scientists measuring light for colour. In the 1920s, an astronomer named Edwin Hubble noticed something curious. The farther away a galaxy was, the redder its light became. That shift was not because the galaxies were burning differently, but because the space between us and them was stretching, pulling the light's waves longer, just as the pitch of a siren drops as it drives away. This redshift became a cosmic language. It told us, gently and clearly, that the universe is not fixed. It's moving, expanding in every direction. The galaxies are not falling away from one another through space, but with space. If you could watch the universe from outside, if there was such a place to stand, you would see it swelling like a vast balloon. The galaxies would not be racing through the air, they would be carried apart by the swelling of the surface itself. We can picture this easily with small things, ink dots spreading on an inflating balloon, crumbs floating on rising dough, or boats that drift apart not because they row, but because the tide lifts and pulls the water itself. On the cosmic scale, this happens everywhere, at once, and to every observer. No matter where you stand in the universe, it appears as if everything else is moving away. There is no true centre, only countless perspectives carried outward together, like lanterns rising on the same wind. The space we live in is gentle, but relentless. As it stretches, the galaxies that are not tightly held by gravity drift apart. Here in our small cluster, the local group, the pull of gravity still wins. The Milky Way and Andromeda are slowly drawing together, locked in a dance that will end in their merger billions of years from now. But beyond this cluster, the rest of the universe is escaping. The expansion grows faster with distance, until galaxies far enough away move faster than light itself, not by breaking any rule, but by simply riding the wave of expanding space. We will never catch them. Even if we could build ships that move close to the speed of light, space would always grow faster, placing them forever beyond reach. If that sounds sad, try to imagine it differently. Picture standing on a shore at dusk watching the tide go out. The sea does not run away from you out of malice. It simply moves with the rhythm of its own nature. The horizon changes, and yet the waves near your feet still glimmer, still breathe. The same is true for us. The universe is not rejecting us, it's just being what it is, vast, restless, and full of motion. Scientists call the boundary beyond which we can never see or reach the cosmic event horizon. It is the ultimate shoreline of visibility, the place where the light of distant galaxies can no longer cross the growing gulf. That horizon is about 16 billion light-years away, a number too large to feel, but not too large to imagine. You could think of it as the edge of a conversation, a point where the universe becomes too distant to answer back. Beyond it, galaxies still exist, still spin and shine, but we will never know their names. Their light will never reach us. They are like letters sent too late, from a world already swallowed by time. Over the next 100 billion years, this horizon will move closer, and more galaxies will vanish beyond it. The sky will thin. The map of constellations will fade, leaving only the faint glow of our own merged galaxy, Milky Way, as some call it, surrounded by darkness. In that distant future, the inhabitants of that lone galaxy will look out and see only their own stars. They will have no evidence that other galaxies ever existed. To them, the universe will seem static, eternal, unchanging. They will not know that the cosmos once shimmered with 1 trillion other worlds. The record of expansion, the echo of the Big Bang itself, will have stretched into wavelengths so long that no instrument could ever detect them. The story of our cosmic origin will have faded from the page, and yet we are here now, living at a rare and precious moment, a time when the universe still reveals its wider shape. We can see the distant galaxies. We can still trace the faint ripples in the afterglow of creation, known as the cosmic background light, the soft, ancient warmth left over from the beginning. We are witnesses standing in the small window between the opaque past and the unreachable future. It's as if the cosmos briefly opened its curtain for us, just long enough to say, "This is what I am," before closing it again forever. Perhaps it's no coincidence that we live now, when the universe is still visible. The forces that shape the stars also shape us, and we're part of the same unfolding story. We arrived at a time when the light has travelled far enough to be seen, but not so far that it disappears. We are, in a sense, the universe observing itself at its most knowable moment, a brief flicker of awareness before the long quiet night. When you think about expansion in this way, it stops feeling like loss and begins to feel like rhythm. The galaxies move apart not to erase one another, but to make space for new beginnings. The cosmos grows, and with it, so do we, in knowledge, in wonder, in understanding of our own place within the pattern. We do not need to chase what is leaving. Everything we need to know is already here, flowing through us as softly as light through glass. So, when you next look up and see the faint silver of the Milky Way stretched across the sky, think of it not as the edge of your reach, but as the centre of your belonging. We are part of this expansion, carried along by it, written into its motion. The universe expands not around us, but through us. And as we drift along that gentle current of space and time, the story of motion begins to fold into another, the story of speed, time, and the beautiful, unbreakable rule that light sets for everything that moves. If we follow the thread a little further, we'll find ourselves face to face with that rule, the one that tells us how fast we can travel, how long we can see, and how every heartbeat, every second, is bound to the quiet constant that defines the rhythm of the universe itself. Our quiet exploration now turns to something more subtle, not the distance between galaxies, but the speed that connects them. Light is the oldest traveller we know. It has been crossing the universe since the first atoms formed, carrying every colour, every whisper of what has ever existed. It defines the limits of what we can see and what we can never reach. Everything we know about the cosmos, from the birth of stars to the echo of the Big Bang, comes to us through light. In that sense, light is both messenger and boundary. It moves faster than anything else in the universe, and yet, even it cannot be everywhere at once. When scientists first began to measure how light behaves, they found something astonishing. Its speed never changes. No matter how fast you move toward it or away from it, Light greets you at the same pace, about 300,000 kilometers each second. To the human ear, that number sounds meaningless, like counting grains of sand on a shore. But what it truly means is that there is a rhythm woven into reality itself, a constant beat that everything else must dance to. Even time listens to it. Imagine that you're watching a beam of light from a distant star, the kind that has travelled for millions of years before finding your eyes. It doesn't slow down or fade halfway. It just keeps going, tireless and precise. It's not a runner in a race. It's the race itself. Every other form of motion, every journey we can imagine, happens within the rule that light has already written. No object with mass, not a ship, not a planet, not even the tiniest particle, can ever move faster than this. The closer something gets to that ultimate speed, the heavier it becomes, the more energy it requires to keep accelerating, until eventually the effort itself becomes infinite. It's like trying to chase your own reflection. The faster you move, the more the mirror pulls away. This truth is not a theory waiting to be proven. It's a law that nature has confirmed again and again. In vast laboratories on Earth, physicists send tiny particles spinning near light speed. Protons, electrons, fragments of the universe's own fabric. They race them in circles for hours, adding more and more energy, and yet the particles never quite reach light's velocity. The closer they get, the more stubbornly they resist. It's as if the universe gently places its hand on their shoulder and says, "This is far enough." But light doesn't just limit how fast we can move, it shapes how we experience time itself. As an object approaches the speed of light, time for that object begins to slow down compared to the world it leaves behind. Clocks tick more slowly, heartbeats stretch out, and distances shrink along the direction of travel. To the traveller, everything feels normal, moments still flow naturally, but to the outside observer, the traveller's journey unfolds in slow motion. This strange, beautiful effect is called time dilation, though that phrase feels too mechanical for what it describes. It's more like time's way of balancing the books, ensuring that speed and duration always trade fairly. You can move faster through space, but you must move slower through time. The universe insists on this quiet symmetry. We've tested it, not with galaxies or starships, but with airplanes and satellites. Scientists have flown atomic clocks around the Earth and compared them to clocks that stayed home. The ones that travelled ticked slightly slower, just as Einstein predicted over a century ago. Even our GPS satellites, orbiting above us, run a little out of sync because of both their speed and their distance from Earth's gravity. Without constant correction, your phone's navigation would drift by kilometers each day. It's a small but living proof that time is not absolute. It bends, stretches, and folds in ways that only light truly understands. Try to imagine what this means for a traveller chasing the stars. If you could somehow move close to light speed, the journey would feel shorter for you. Maybe the distance to another star would seem to shrink. Maybe the centuries outside your window would pass like a long dream. But when you returned home, everything you knew would have aged beyond recognition. A single lifetime for you could be thousands of years for the world you left behind. The faster you go, the more alone you become in time. There's a gentle poetry in that. It means that the universe doesn't forbid us from moving fast. It just asks us to pay in years instead of energy. Time itself becomes the toll. And so, even if one day we found the courage to build ships that skim the edge of light speed, we would be stepping not only out of space, but out of history. We would trade the familiar rhythm of our world for a slower, lonelier song. And yet, within that limitation lies something beautiful. The constancy of light gives the universe its structure. It's why causality, the order of cause and effect, exists at all. Because nothing outruns light, everything has to follow the same sequence of events, If you light a candle, its glow must reach your eyes after it's lit, never before. If you call across a room, your voice must travel through the air to be heard. The same principle holds for galaxies and supernovae and cosmic echoes. The universe can be trusted because light keeps its promises. It tells us what happened, when it happened, and how far away that happening is. For billions of years, light has been weaving together a cosmic tapestry of stories, carrying the memory of distant stars, the birth of elements, and the quiet merging of galaxies. Every photon, every particle of light, is a small historian, travelling through the dark to tell us what it saw. Some of those stories began so long ago that the stars which sent them no longer exist. Their light continues onward, unbothered by their absence. In that way, light is the most faithful witness the universe has ever known. When we think about escaping the Milky Way, it's tempting to imagine breaking this limit, finding a way to outrun light, to open shortcuts through space. But so far, every attempt to imagine such a path leads us back to impossibility. The idea of a warp drive, of bending space around a ship to move faster than light, would require something we have never found: matter with negative energy, a kind of substance that pulls rather than pushes. It may not exist at all. Even if it did, the amount needed would be beyond imagination. So, for now, light remains the guardian at the edge of the possible. A reminder that some doors in the universe are not meant to open, at least not yet. And perhaps that's a kindness. Because if everything were reachable, nothing would feel distant enough to wonder about. Our inability to outrun light is also the reason we can see the past, study the stars, and feel awe when we look up. It creates the distance necessary for beauty. The darkness between worlds is not emptiness, it's perspective. So, as we drift further into this story, let's carry that idea with us. That light is not an obstacle, but a teacher. It shows us how to move, how to measure, how to wait. It tells us that the universe, in all its vastness, still moves to a single, patient tempo. And somewhere, within that rhythm is where we live, slow enough to watch the stars, fast enough to dream of them. The trail of clues leads us gently into a stranger truth still, that time itself can stretch and twist depending on how we move. For centuries, humans believed that time was something universal, flowing everywhere at the same pace, like the steady current of a river. But Einstein taught us that time is not a background. It is a fabric, woven together with space, bending and rippling as energy and motion pass through it. And the thread that guides all of this is light. The same rhythm that limits how fast we can travel also dictates how slowly we experience the passing of moments. To understand this, you don't need equations or clocks floating through space. Just imagine two friends standing apart. One stays home, on Earth, and the other climbs aboard a ship that can move close to the speed of light, fast enough that even seconds begin to feel stretched thin. As the ship accelerates, the traveller's time begins to slow compared to the person who stayed behind. Heartbeats lengthen, seconds loosen, and the world outside seems to race ahead. If the traveller were to journey for what feels like a few years, then return, they might find that decades have passed for the one who remained. The traveller would have lived a shorter time, even though both measured life by the same ticking of their own hearts. This is what we call time dilation, but rather than a cold term, it's better understood as time's way of keeping balance. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. The universe doesn't punish you for motion, it simply keeps the books even. You can wander far, but you cannot take the same amount of time with you. To go faster through the cosmos means to experience less of it within yourself. In the end, you cannot have both. When you first hear this, it sounds like something that belongs only to science fiction, but we've seen it happen quietly and precisely. Astronauts who have spent long periods orbiting Earth return home having aged slightly less than those who stayed on the ground. The difference is tiny, only fractions of a second, but real. Even the atomic clocks carried on satellites above us tick at slightly different rates because of both their speed and their height in Earth's weaker gravity. Every time you check a location on your phone, your GPS corrects for that effect, adjusting for the tiny warping of time that happens just above our heads. It's a small reminder that even in our daily lives, we live inside a bending universe. Now imagine extending this effect to the stars. If a traveller could accelerate until they moved at 99% of light speed, the journey to our neighbouring galaxy Andromeda would look almost unchanged to those left behind. They would see the ship taking 2.5 million years to arrive. But for the traveller, inside that ship time would flow differently. They might experience only tens of thousands of years, still longer than human history, but a fraction of what the outside world measures. The faster they move, the more the universe seems to compress around them, as if space itself is making room for their passage. And yet, when they finally slow down, the universe snaps back to its true scale. The world they left would be ancient, its civilizations long dust, its languages forgotten. They would arrive not in the future they hoped to see, but in one that could never know them. There's a quiet sadness to that. Every effort to travel faster also becomes an act of letting go, of time, of place, of shared experience. The faster we move, the lonelier we become. The universe doesn't forbid us from travelling far. It only reminds us that speed comes with solitude. Perhaps that is its way of teaching patience, of showing us that every step forward must be lived, not rushed. And yet, there is beauty in this trade, because time dilation also means that travellers could, in a sense, live longer than they otherwise would. Voyage lasting centuries to the rest of the world might feel like only a few years to those aboard. For them, the stars outside would drift by like frozen sparks, and they would live within a bubble of stretched moments, a slow-motion eternity where time has softened its edges. It's a strange comfort. The faster you go, the more slowly you age, as though motion itself becomes a kind of shelter. But the cost is everything you leave behind. You can feel echoes of this even here on Earth. When you walk through a familiar city after many years away, time feels uneven. The buildings are the same, but you've changed. The world has aged differently than you have. That's time dilation on a human scale. The relativity of memory. We live in a universe where even waiting is a form of travel, and sometimes staying still is what lets you move the farthest. If we listen closely, we can almost hear what the universe is saying through this strange behaviour. That motion and stillness are not opposites, but companions. The more we rush through space, the more we slow through time. The more we stand still, the faster life moves around us. Every heartbeat, every orbit, every turn of a planet balances somewhere between those two. In that balance, there's a quiet symmetry, like a breath drawn and released. This is why, when we look at light, we're not just seeing distance, we are seeing time itself laid bare. A star 1,000 light years away shows us what it looked like 1,000 years ago. A galaxy billions of light years away shows us what the universe looked like when it was young. We're always gazing backward, never seeing anything as it is, only as it was. In that sense, every glance into the night sky is an act of time travel, done without engines or ships. It's the purest kind of journey, one taken by patience alone. If humanity ever learns to build vessels capable of reaching the stars, they will carry more than food and fuel. They will carry this truth, that time itself will change as they move, that they will not only cross distance but drift through centuries. And those who leave will not return to the same world, or perhaps to any world that remembers them. But that is not tragedy. It's the natural poetry of a living universe. Everything moves, everything changes, and nothing returns to where it began. And so, time dilation is not a wall meant to keep us confined. It's a reminder that the universe values equilibrium, that every action ripples through both space and time. When we understand that, we begin to see why the speed of light is not an obstacle, but a compass, marking the edges of what can be shared. It defines the rhythm of existence itself. Within that rhythm, every life, whether it lasts a single breath or 1,000 years, becomes part of the same grand tempo. If we follow that rhythm a little further, it leads us into the practical heart of the problem. Not just how time resists us, but how energy itself rises up to meet every attempt at greater speed. The faster we go, the more the universe asks in return, until even entire worlds would not hold enough power to pay the fare. From here, the story opens into the most stubborn truth of all, that every dream of travelling faster, farther or longer must answer to the price of energy. It sounds simple at first. You burn fuel, you push forward, you go. But in the wide arithmetic of the cosmos, the cost of motion does not rise gently. It climbs like a mountain whose summit keeps receding as you walk. Every time you add speed, the universe adds weight to your journey, not by mass in the physical sense, but by resistance, by the invisible toll it demands from energy itself. If we think of the universe as a kind of ocean, then light moves across it as the purest wave, the crest that can never be surpassed. Anything slower than that, anything that carries mass or memory, has to work against the current. The closer you try to move to that ultimate pace, the heavier the water feels, and the more energy you pour into each moment of motion. Soon the cost becomes so steep that it's not just impractical, but impossible. The faster you go, the more the universe holds you back, until it would take an infinite amount of energy just to reach that final step where light already dances. It's hard to imagine infinite in a human way, but think of it like this. If you tried to accelerate something as small as a pebble to near the speed of light, you would need more energy than our entire planet produces in centuries. If that pebble were as large as a spaceship, you'd need more energy than the sun can give off in years. And for a vessel carrying people, air, food, water, and the soft weight of dreams, you'd need the output of a star for a lifetime, and still it wouldn't be enough. No matter how advanced our technology becomes, no matter how clever our engines, that curve of cost rises faster than our ability to climb it. Scientists have imagined many ways to soften that curve. They speak of fusion engines which would use the same process that powers the sun, turning the hearts of atoms into light and warmth. In theory, such an engine could release enormous amounts of energy, far more than chemical fuel ever could. But even that would not be enough. The fuel needed to reach a fraction of light speed would fill ships larger than cities. The challenge is not only in how much power you can create, but in how much you can carry. To accelerate all that mass, you'd need even more fuel, which would make the ship heavier still, a spiral of demands with no end. Antimatter sounds like a magical solution, the perfect partner to matter, annihilating into pure energy when the two meet. It's often said that this could be the ultimate fuel, but the reality is more poetic than practical. Antimatter is so rare that making even a grain of it requires the energy of entire nations. It cannot be mined or found. It must be created from the very forces we hope to escape. It's like building a sailboat out of wind, elegant in idea, impossible in practice. Then there are the lighter dreams, sails pushed by sunlight, or by immense lasers that could push small ships across interstellar distances. These are among the most graceful ideas ever conceived. Ships that drift without fuel, gliding on the pressure of light itself. But light, like wind, grows weaker with distance. The farther you go, the softer the push. To reach another star, the beam that drives you would need to remain focused over trillions of kilometers, thinner than a thread and stronger than anything we can yet build. Every form of propulsion we know meets the same quiet barrier. The universe is too vast and our tools too heavy. The distances between stars are not just wide, they are measured in the light itself. For each step we gain in speed, the energy required rises almost exponentially until the numbers no longer feel real. It's like chasing a mirage that retreats as fast as you run. The more you believe you're closing the gap, the farther away the horizon slips. Even if we somehow gathered the energy of planets, the question remains, where would we put it? Energy cannot be stored forever. Batteries leak, fuels decay, and even light itself fades as it travels. Across thousands or millions of years, any store of power would lose part of itself to the quiet, invisible friction of existence. Heat would build, systems would degrade. No machine, however perfect, escapes the soft pull of entropy, the rule that says everything eventually slows, cools, and unravels. This isn't just a physical problem, it's also a philosophical one. The universe gives us power in measured doses. Stars shine, then fade. Motion lasts only as long as the energy behind it can be maintained. Everything moves, and everything rests, in cycles of release and exhaustion. To imagine infinite motion, eternal travel across endless dark, is to imagine something outside the fabric of this balance. The cosmos seems to prefer harmony over victory. It lets nothing move too far without also asking for rest. You can see this principle everywhere. A wave that rises too high breaks. A fire that burns too hot consumes its own fuel. The same truth applies to our cosmic ambitions. The dream of escaping our galaxy is not denied to us by cruelty, but by design. The same balance that holds the planets in orbit, that allows light to cross space without scattering, also keeps us within a certain range of motion. We belong to this rhythm. Still, that hasn't stopped us from dreaming. The minds that built the first rockets, that reached the moon and sent small emissaries like Voyager to the edge of the solar system, were not defeated by numbers. They were inspired by them. They saw that every boundary, even one that cannot be crossed, can still be explored in thought. And in that sense, the universe's limits are not cages, but invitations to understand more deeply. When we finally accept that no amount of energy can carry us across the intergalactic void, the question shifts from how far can we go to how fully can we live within where we are. The stars of the Milky Way are more than enough to fill lifetimes, more than enough to keep wonder alive for as long as our species endures. We don't need to escape to find infinity. It's already here, folded into the light of every sunrise and every distant glow we see through our telescopes. Energy may define what we can do, but curiosity defines what we will try. The numbers are vast, but so is our imagination. And maybe in that balance lies the true harmony of the cosmos, that we are always reaching, always learning, but also always held gently by the same rules that govern stars. If we follow this thread a little further, we'll find that space itself conspires to keep us close, not only through speed or energy, but through the quiet emptiness that stretches between galaxies, a void so thin and cold that it turns even survival into an art of endurance. The path now carries us outward, far beyond the gentle swirl of our galaxy, into the dark between. Here, space becomes something entirely different. Not a place filled with stars and light, but a kind of silence so deep it forgets how to echo. When you imagine the space between galaxies, it's easy to think of emptiness, but that word doesn't do it justice. Emptiness implies something missing, a hollow that might one day be filled. This is different. This is a fullness of absence, a vast stillness so complete that even thought seems to soften inside it. Inside the Milky Way, the spaces between stars are not truly empty. They hold thin clouds of gas, drifting atoms, and specks of dust that, given enough time, can collapse to form new suns. This is the interstellar medium, fragile, faint, but still alive with potential. Yet when you leave the galaxy's edge and drift into the intergalactic realm, even that whisper of material disappears. Out there, the average space between particles grows so wide that a single atom might float alone for the distance between Earth and the Moon before it meets another. A region large enough to contain all the oceans of Earth might hold just one lonely hydrogen atom. To picture that is almost impossible. The mind resists such thinness. We're used to air pressing against our skin, to the dust in sunlight, to the invisible weight of atmosphere that wraps us like a blanket. But in this place, there is nothing to press back. No scent, no breeze, no sound. If you could stand here, though stand is the wrong word for there's no up or down, you would feel nothing at all. Even light travels differently. With so little matter to scatter it, the darkness is total. It's not the black of a closed room, but a depth that seems endless, the dark behind all other darks. Between the galaxies, even temperature loses meaning. There is heat, in theory. A few stray photons of the cosmic background glow left over from the birth of the universe. But that warmth is stretched so thin that it lies only a few degrees above absolute zero, the temperature where all motion nearly stops. Imagine being surrounded by an ocean that never stirs, where even the concept of cold feels too active a word. That is intergalactic space, not hostile exactly, but indifferent in a way nothing on Earth could ever be. If you released a handful of atoms here, they would drift apart, never touching again. If you sent a signal, it would travel endlessly, crossing unimaginable distances before it ever found an ear, if it found one at all. This is why no ship, no matter how advanced, could survive long beyond a galaxy. There is nothing to draw from, no sunlight to harvest, no raw material to repair with. Every screw, every circuit, every breath of air would have to be brought along from home. The farther you travel, the more fragile your little world becomes, a bubble of warmth adrift in an ocean that neither welcomes nor resists you. In this place, the laws of physics do not change, but they seem to take on a different tone, as though the universe itself has grown quiet. The only motion comes from what you bring with you. The stars of the galaxies behind you grow dim, swallowed by the stretching of space. Ahead, the black thickens into something that feels more like time than distance. If you could look back, your home galaxy would shrink to a pearl, then to a speck, then to nothing at all. Astronomers sometimes call these voids cosmic deserts, and the word fits. Like sand, the vacuum looks smooth from afar but is full of invisible structure, faint threads of matter connecting galaxies in vast web-like strands. Between those strands are caverns of nothingness so wide that entire superclusters could fit inside. The largest of these, known as voids, are hundreds of millions of light-years across, yet they are not evil, not even lonely. They are simply the universe at rest. They remind us that creation needs emptiness to shape itself around. Just as silence gives meaning to sound, these gaps give galaxies room to breathe. The beauty of this vast emptiness is quiet but profound. It is what keeps galaxies from colliding too quickly, what allows cosmic structures to exist at all. In the beginning, the universe was almost perfectly smooth. Only tiny differences, whispers of density, fluctuations in light, allowed matter to gather, to clump, to grow into stars and worlds and us. Without those patches of almost nothing, there would be no something. The universe builds itself out of the contrast between fullness and void. Still, to imagine travelling through this nothingness is to imagine a kind of eternal drift. A ship crossing this region would see no sunrise, no starlight, no point of reference. Its instruments would detect only the faint hiss of background radiation, the afterglow of creation itself, now stretched so far it hums in radio waves. Communication would fade as signals weaken and delay. The journey would become less about reaching and more about enduring. Out here, progress feels like standing still. Time itself stretches, not because of relativity, but because there is nothing left to mark its passage. And yet, even here, the universe is not truly silent. If you could listen with the right kind of ear, one sensitive enough to hear particles colliding once every few centuries, you'd catch tiny murmurs, a cosmic hush like wind through tall grass, only infinitely slower. That faint whisper is proof that the universe still remembers its own birth. Even in emptiness, there remains a trace of everything that ever was. It's strange to think that all galaxies, including ours, are surrounded by this deep stillness. We live inside a tiny oasis of light and warmth, but around us lies an expanse that no technology can cross, not because of walls or barriers, but because it offers nothing to sustain us. To venture out here would be like stepping into the sea without a shore, where direction ceases to matter, and even survival begins to lose its meaning. Still, there is something humbling in that thought. To know that such vast silence exists reminds us of how precious every sound, every colour, every breath truly is. The void doesn't threaten us, it defines us. It shows us that the smallest flicker of light, the faintest warmth, becomes sacred against such a backdrop. The emptiness between galaxies is not there to scare us. It's there to remind us that we are rare, that we are in every sense the exception. So as we drift in imagination through this boundless ocean, remember that the Milky Way, with all its stars and life, floats within this sea of stillness like a single lantern on a dark lake. Its glow is fragile but steady, held together by gravity, memory, and the quiet persistence of matter against the odds. From here, as we linger at the edge of that faint light, the story turns toward the one element that still moves through this calm, the invisible rain that never stops falling, the silent storm that threads even the emptiest reaches of space. If we follow the thread a little further, we enter the part of space that moves even when everything else seems still, the invisible storm that never stops falling. Out here, where galaxies fade and the void deepens, there is no wind, no sound, no flicker of motion, and yet every second a silent rain of energy drifts through the dark, tiny particles moving at almost the speed of light, carrying with them the faint echo of cataclysm scattered across the universe. Astronomers call them cosmic rays, but that name doesn't capture their character. They are not rays in the sense of gentle beams. They are more like seeds of fire, born from explosions so vast that their light outshines entire galaxies for a moment, and then vanishes again. These particles come from the deaths of stars, from supernovae that fling the remains of their hearts across space. They come from quasars, black holes spinning at the centres of galaxies, releasing torrents of energy like cosmic waterfalls. Some even come from far beyond our local group, crossing the vast, dark ocean for millions of years before brushing against a world like ours. They travel in silence, and when they arrive, they pass through everything: rock, air, water, even us. Right now, as you listen, hundreds of them are moving through your body every second, so small and swift that you never feel them. They are reminders that the universe is never truly empty. To be struck by one of these particles is to experience something almost poetic, the universe reaching out and touching you across unfathomable distances. But for any traveller venturing between the stars, that same touch becomes a constant threat. At the speeds required for interstellar or intergalactic travel, every collision with even a single atom becomes an impact of immense energy. A lone grain of dust, a molecule adrift in the dark, would hit with the force of a bomb. What feels like nothing at near light speed becomes everything. It's not hard to picture what that means for a ship crossing the void. At rest, the vacuum seems perfectly harmless, but the faster you go, the denser it becomes. Not because there's more matter in it, but because you are meeting that matter at greater and greater energy. Every fragment of the universe becomes a tiny projectile. At the scale of galaxies, the dark is full of invisible bullets. The ship's hull would need to be more than metal. It would have to be a miracle, a skin that could absorb the fury of motion itself. Engineers have imagined many ways to defend against this invisible rain. Magnetic fields that deflect charged particles, thick layers of shielding made from water or plastic, even clouds of gas surrounding the vessel like a protective halo. But each solution adds weight, and every gram of weight demands more energy. The safer you try to make the ship, the harder it becomes to move. It's like wearing armor while trying to swim. The protection becomes its own burden. Radiation is not just a matter of energy, it's a matter of persistence. Even a ship sitting still in deep space must endure it. The cosmic background hums softly at microwave frequencies, the universe's last warm sigh from its earliest moments. On top of that come high-energy protons, atomic nuclei and gamma rays, each carrying enough force to split molecules and change DNA. Astronauts in low Earth orbit already face this storm, though our planet's magnetic field shields most of it away. Without that protection, space becomes a constant drizzle of harm, one too slow to notice but too steady to escape. Imagine standing in the open during a light rain. One drop is nothing, 1,000 are a nuisance. But after hours, your skin soaks through, your clothes grow heavy, and the chill seeps inward. Now stretch that sensation across decades, centuries, or millennia. Radiation doesn't just strike, it accumulates. It breaks things apart molecule by molecule, leaving behind damage too small to see, but too vast to repair. Electronics flicker and die. Circuits lose their memory, materials weaken. Life, however well protected, begins to drift away from the shape it once held. There's something humbling about that. Radiation is both destroyer and creator. The same storms that threaten travellers also forge the elements of life. Every atom of carbon in your body, every trace of iron in your blood was once made in the heart of a star and scattered into the cosmos by such violence. The universe makes life from destruction, then destroys life with the same tools, a kind of circular generosity that feels almost deliberate. You are, quite literally, made of the same particles that now move invisibly through you. The storm outside is also within. To some degree, we have already begun to feel its reach. Astronauts who spend long months in orbit return home with subtle marks of radiation's touch, changes in their DNA, small shifts in immune response, hints that even our cells remember the sky. Their bodies, after a while, begin to show the quiet accounting of the cosmos. And yet, for all that, they also prove how resilient life can be. They remind us that endurance isn't always about invincibility. Sometimes it's about continuing softly, in spite of what the universe sends our way. The challenge of radiation isn't simply to shield against it. It's to live with it, to design systems and minds that can survive amid decay. Maybe that's a metaphor too, that existence itself is a form of exposure. To be alive is to be slowly changed by the world around you. The difference between a cosmic traveller and a person on Earth is only in scale, not in principle. Both are shaped by invisible forces that pass through them, day after day, leaving traces of what they've seen. Even in the deepest void, where everything seems empty, this rain of particles continues, relentless, impartial, eternal. It gives the lie to the idea that space is truly silent. There is always a faint hum, a soft patter, a slow conversation between energy and matter. The universe, in its own way, is constantly speaking. And perhaps that's the quiet lesson hidden inside this invisible storm. That even in stillness, there is movement. Even in silence, there is sound. The same radiation that makes deep space dangerous also keeps it alive, like the faint crackle of a fire that never goes out. And though it erodes everything we build, it also reminds us that decay is not an end, but a continuation of the same process that gave birth to stars and worlds. As we drift onward, leaving this storm behind, the story now begins to curve inward again, from the violence of energy to the quiet persistence of time. Because even if we could endure the radiation and cross the void, we would still meet another limit, one older and more intimate than any other. the simple truth that everything, given time, falls apart. And in that falling, the universe finds its way back to balance once more. From here, the story drifts deeper into stillness, into a truth as old as time itself. Out in the endless dark, nothing ever truly lasts. No matter how well we build, how carefully we protect, or how long we plan, everything slowly leans toward disorder. It isn't punishment. It isn't failure. It's simply how the universe breathes. Scientists call it the second law of thermodynamics, but you could think of it as the quiet law of forgetting, the one that says every structure, every thought, every heartbeat will one day release its hold and return to the larger rhythm of chaos, entropy. The word sounds cold, but its meaning is intimate. It's the slow unwinding of all things, the warmth that escapes from a cooling cup of tea, the rust that grows on an old gate, the soft fray in a threadbare sleeve. It's what makes time move forward instead of backward. In every moment, energy spreads out just a little, order dissolves a little, and the universe relaxes by one more breath. It's not destruction, it's balance. Without it, nothing would ever change, and change is what allows life to exist in the first place. For machines, entropy is a constant companion. Out here in the silence of space, there is no air to corrode metal, no rain to wash circuits, no wind to wear surfaces smooth. Yet still, they decay. The radiation that falls through the void slowly rearranges atoms, loosening bonds, flipping switches that never flip back. The smallest imperfection grows, like a crack spreading through glass in slow motion. It takes decades, sometimes centuries, but eventually even the most perfect machine begins to forget what it was built to do. You can see it in the Voyagers, the twin spacecraft launched in the 1970s, now drifting beyond the edge of our solar system. They still whisper to Earth across billions of kilometers, though their power is fading. Each year, a little more of their warmth seeps away. Their batteries grow weak, their instruments flicker, their messages stretch thinner and thinner, until they are almost indistinguishable from the background hiss of the universe. One day, they'll fall silent, their antennas frozen mid-sentence. And yet, even that silence will be beautiful, because it means they lasted long enough to join the quiet itself. The same happens in the space station orbiting our planet. Even though it circles within sight of home, its walls are constantly wearing down. Solar radiation makes materials brittle. Metal expands and contracts with each sunrise and sunset, thousands of times a year. Tiny micrometeorites strike the hull like sand hitting a window. Astronauts patch, replace, recalibrate, but they know they are only delaying what is inevitable. Machines do not die all at once. They fade. They surrender by degrees, giving themselves back to time one piece at a time. We try to fight entropy with maintenance, with ingenuity, with endless care. But the truth is, the universe is patient, and we are not. Every sealed chamber leaks a little heat. Every orbit sheds a little speed. Every circuit loses a fraction of its memory. Even in experiments meant to mimic closed worlds, like Biosphere 2, the glass dome where people once tried to create a miniature, self-sustaining planet, the balance always tilts. Oxygen levels drop. Unexpected chemical reactions bloom. Ecosystems stumble into chaos. The closed system, no matter how carefully designed, always finds a way to open itself to disorder. It's as if the universe insists on keeping the conversation going, never allowing anything to remain perfectly still. There's something deeply human in that too. We're not immune to entropy, we are made of it. Our bodies are constantly repairing themselves, patching DNA, renewing skin, replacing cells, tiny victories against the drift toward stillness. But the repairs never quite keep up. Over time, the system relaxes, we grow older, the edges blur, and in that slow unwinding we find meaning, because it is the proof that we've lived. Entropy isn't the enemy of order, it's its twin. Without it, stars would never die, and new ones would never form. Heavy elements, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the gold in a wedding ring, were all born from the collapse and decay of older suns. The universe creates by destroying. Every breath you take carries the ashes of stars that once burned and the promise of stars yet to be. Even the molecules in your body are temporary alliances, destined to scatter back into the cosmic sea and begin again somewhere else. So when we speak of fragile machines and fading lights, we're also speaking of ourselves. Every invention, every discovery, every voyage is part of this cycle, a flare of order shining against the dark before it softens back into silence. The great paradox of exploration is that the farther we go, the more fragile we become, because distance amplifies decay. A ship crossing the intergalactic void would need to repair itself for millennia without help, without rest, without failure. Eventually its systems would wear thin, its energy would drain, and entropy would win, not through violence but through patience. But perhaps that too is the universe's quiet mercy. Perfection would be unbearable. Without the certainty of fading, there would be no urgency to love, no reason to build, no sweetness in the fleeting moments that pass between beginning and end. Entropy gives life its flavour, the same way night gives meaning to dawn. Every star that dies lights another's birth. Every silence teaches us to listen a little more closely. In a sense, the fragility of our creations mirrors our own. We build machines not just to survive longer, but to express our defiance of time. We send them outward knowing they will eventually fail, because what matters isn't their endurance, it's their journey. Like the Voyagers, we too send our stories into the dark, hoping that somewhere, sometime, something will hear. And when those messages fade, when the circuits cool and the memories dissolve, the silence they leave behind will still be part of the same grand pattern. The universe, after all, has always made art out of impermanence. Entropy ensures that nothing lasts forever, but it also ensures that nothing is ever truly lost. The heat that leaves your skin becomes part of the air. The fragments of old stars become soil for new worlds. The signal that fades into static joins the background music of existence. Every act of fading is also an act of returning, and maybe, just maybe, that's the most comforting law of all, that the universe keeps everything, just not in the same form. From here, the story begins to turn back toward us, toward the travellers and dreamers who live within this restless universe. Because if even our machines grow tired, what happens to the bodies that built them? What becomes of the people who carry the memory of gravity, warmth, and home within them as they step into the endless night? The next part of our journey will follow them, fragile, curious, and deeply human, into the question of how life itself survives among the stars. Our quiet exploration now turns inward, from the slow decay of metal and machine to something softer and more fragile, the human body itself. For all our ambition, for all the technology that surrounds us, we remain creatures of one small world. Every heartbeat, every breath, every rhythm in our bodies is a quiet echo of the planet that made us. Gravity, sunlight, air. These are not just conditions we live under. They are woven into our biology like lines in a song, and even when we leave Earth, that song keeps playing, quietly reminding us where we came from. If you've ever spent a long time away from home, you know how the body remembers what it misses. The smell of rain, the warmth of a kitchen, the firmness of ground beneath your feet. These things are not luxuries. They are languages the body speaks fluently. Now, imagine stepping into a world that never had any of them. In orbit, there's no true up or down. The air never moves unless pushed by a fan. Day and night switch places every 90 minutes as you circle the planet. In that weightless quiet, your body begins to wonder what has happened to gravity, its oldest companion. Astronauts describe it as a kind of forgetting. Muscles, no longer needed to hold them upright, begin to soften. Bones, without the steady tug of weight, start to lose their density. Even the heart, unburdened by gravity's pull, changes shape, pumping blood in ways it never had to before. In just a few weeks, the body begins to rewrite itself to match its new environment, and yet those changes are not entirely kind. When astronauts return to Earth, they find gravity waiting like an old friend who hugs too hard. Their legs tremble, their bones ache. The body remembers Earth by the pain of returning to it. In the long quiet of space, even the smallest comforts disappear. You can't feel the wind, you can't smell the soil. There are no natural sounds, no insects, no rustle of leaves, no soft hum of rain. The silence becomes its own weather. For the mind, that silence is both beautiful and heavy. The brain, used to constant noise, begins to fill the gap with its own thoughts, looping them, reshaping them. The longer you're away, the more Earth becomes a memory you can feel in your skin. We've learned some of this from the astronauts who have lived and worked on the International Space Station, where every minute of their lives is a balance between wonder and weariness. They orbit high above the world, moving fast enough to see 16 sunrises and sunsets every day. They drift through a floating home that hums like a gentle machine. Air recyclers, computers, pumps. Yet every sound is artificial. Every sunrise is behind glass. They're surrounded by the world's most advanced technology, but their bodies are quietly missing something simple, the weight of their own existence. One of the most revealing experiments was the twin study involving Scott and Mark Kelly. Identical brothers, one on Earth, the other in orbit for nearly a year. When Scott returned, scientists found small but striking changes. His chromosomes had aged differently. His immune system had adjusted to a new rhythm. Even the expression of his genes, the molecular handwriting of who he was, had shifted in response to the space environment. It's as if the body, sensing the absence of home, began to edit its own instructions. Though many of those changes faded after his return, some lingered, quiet reminders that space had touched him in ways beyond sight or memory. Radiation plays its part too. High-energy particles that Earth's atmosphere normally blocks flow freely through the station. Each one leaves a microscopic scar in the body's cells. Over time, they add up. Not enough to destroy, but enough to remind us that we're guests in a place that was never meant for us. To live beyond Earth is to negotiate constantly with the universe, trading safety for discovery, comfort for perspective. And yet, for all the strain, the human spirit seems built to reach anyway. Every astronaut who returns speaks of something else that happens, a transformation that has nothing to do with muscle or bone. Looking down at Earth from orbit, they describe an emotion so powerful it defies language, the overview effect. It's the realization that all borders are imaginary, that the world is one fragile, luminous sphere suspended in darkness. From that height, our divisions blur, and what remains is astonishingly simple. Water, clouds, land, and a thin line of air holding everything alive. Many of them weep, many return changed. It's as though leaving Earth makes them love it more. It tells us something profound about what we are. The human body was built to survive gravity, but the human heart was built to survive meaning. We can adapt to new air, new light, new landscapes, but we cannot stop yearning for the place that shaped our rhythm. Even after centuries, even after evolution may reshape us into new forms, that memory will remain somewhere inside, the memory of one planet, one pull, one home. Sometimes, when astronauts sleep in orbit, they dream of falling. Not because they're afraid, but because their bodies miss the feeling of being caught by the Earth's pull. They describe it as peaceful, a falling without fear, a surrender to something familiar. It's a reminder that gravity isn't just a force that holds us down. It's a connection, a thread between body and planet, between matter and meaning. When we leave it behind, that thread stretches, but it never fully breaks. So perhaps the body's frailty isn't a weakness at all. Perhaps it's a way of keeping us tethered, a quiet promise between Earth and those who leave it. The bones may thin, the muscles may soften, the cells may change, but all of it is just the body's way of whispering, "Don't forget where you came from." We might one day adapt, building new kinds of bodies or merging with our machines. We might find ways to resist radiation, to keep our bones strong, to grow food and air and comfort in the endless dark. But even then, somewhere deep inside, we will still carry the echo of this blue world, a rhythm older than memory, beating beneath all the noise of progress. And from that rhythm, another longing grows. If our bodies can't yet live forever away from home, perhaps our minds will try to build homes of their own, sealed ecosystems where life could last for centuries, bubbles of warmth floating in the infinite cold. The next part of our story drifts toward that dream, the fragile hope of building little worlds within worlds, and learning whether perfection, when it finally arrives, can ever truly hold. If we follow the thread a little further, it leads us into one of humanity's oldest and most tender dreams, the hope of building small, perfect worlds within the larger, imperfect one. Every generation, in one form or another, has imagined a self-contained Eden, a place where life can last without help, where the balance between breath and leaf, between flame and air, holds forever. It is a dream born from both longing and necessity, because if we ever hope to live beyond Earth, we will need to bring a piece of its balance with us. Imagine a glass sphere floating in space. Inside, there's air to breathe, water to drink, and green plants twisting gently toward the light. The walls are thin enough for sunlight to filter through, but strong enough to keep the vacuum out. A little world sealed from the infinite dark. It looks peaceful, but inside that stillness lies a constant tension. Oxygen produced, carbon dioxide absorbed, heat exchanged, water recycled. Every process depends on every other, each living thing both giving and taking. It's a kind of symphony where every note must arrive at the right time, or the music falters. We've tried to build these microcosms before. In the early 1990s, a group of scientists and dreamers constructed a great glass structure in the Arizona desert called Biosphere 2. It was meant to be a living model of Earth itself, a miniature planet under glass with forests, oceans, and even a coral reef. The people inside would grow their own food, recycle their air, and live sealed away from the outside world. For a while, it worked. They planted crops, measured oxygen, listened to the slow rustle of leaves, but after a few months things began to drift. The oxygen fell, the crops wilted, tiny chemical reactions the designers hadn't predicted began to eat away at the balance. Insects overran the gardens and small microbes hidden in the soil consumed the air. By the end of 2 years, the crew was exhausted, and the experiment, though not a failure in spirit, had proved a difficult truth. No loop, however carefully designed, is perfect. Life, it seems, doesn't want to be contained. It thrives on exchange, with the wind, with the soil, with the subtle push and pull of a planet's cycles. When you seal it inside a bubble, the balance begins to sigh and shift, as if life itself is gently asking to be left open. Even on our space stations, where life support systems are masterpieces of precision, the process is never truly closed. Air is filtered, water is distilled, carbon dioxide is scrubbed away, but supplies still run low. Machines break. People must send new parts, new food, new hope from home. Perfection remains just out of reach, like the last star seen before dawn fades the sky. That isn't to say we stop trying. Scientists around the world are still pursuing this dream, developing systems that could someday sustain human life on the Moon, Mars, or farther still. The European Space Agency's Melissa project, short for a name too long to sound gentle, is one such endeavour. They imagine a small ecosystem where plants feed people and people feed plants, their breath and waste transformed into renewal. It's elegant in theory, and slowly, piece by piece, it's becoming real. Algae turns carbon dioxide into oxygen. Bacteria recycle nutrients. Each part supports the others, but even these testbeds require constant adjustment, a human hand to keep the rhythm steady. What they reveal, softly and beautifully, is that perfection is not what life asks of us. Life prefers movement, flexibility, a little imperfection at the edges. It wants openness, not glass walls. The same laws that keep galaxies spinning, energy flowing, matter dispersing, are at work in every cell and every ecosystem. To trap them is to freeze them. Even balance, when it lasts too long, begins to decay. You can think of it like breathing. Inhale, exhale. That's the pattern of the universe itself. Energy gathering, releasing, gathering again. A closed system is like holding your breath. It works for a moment, but soon you need to open again, to trade what's inside for what's outside. Even our own planet, seemingly perfect in its cycles, leaks energy every second, radiating the sun's warmth back into space. It lives because it is not sealed, and yet there's something deeply human about trying anyway. To build a small world is an act of reverence, a way of saying, we understand what keeps us alive, and we want to carry it with us. The attempt itself matters, even if the results falter. Biosphere 2 didn't fail. It reminded us how intricate life really is, how air and soil and microbe share a language we're only beginning to translate. It taught us humility, and humility might be the most vital ingredient in survival. The farther we go from Earth, the more that humility will matter. A colony on Mars, or on a drifting ship between the stars, will depend on trust in both machine and biology. People will live in habitats where every breath, every drop of water, must return again and again in the same cycle. There will be no waste, no luxury of forgetting. Everything will have to be cared for, noticed, tended. In that way, the closed system will teach us not perfection, but attention. The art of seeing the invisible work that sustains us. And maybe that's the point. Maybe these experiments are not rehearsals for leaving Earth, but lessons in how to love it better. When you have to account for every molecule of air, you begin to appreciate the generosity of a sky that never runs out. When you have to grow food under lamps, you start to marvel at the simple miracle of sunlight falling freely across a field. The more we try to recreate Earth, the more we understand how irreplaceable it is. In that realization, there's a kind of peace. The dream of self-sustaining worlds doesn't have to mean abandoning our own. It can mean recognizing that we already live inside the most astonishing biosphere imaginable, one that has held us for billions of years, correcting itself through storms and seasons, still breathing, still alive. Perhaps our small experiments under glass are like prayers whispered back to that greater world, gratitude in the form of imitation. And as we dream of such balance, we begin to sense the next quiet truth. Even if we could build a perfect world, seal ourselves away, and survive for centuries, there is another weight we cannot engineer away, the slow gravity of time itself. Because no matter how stable the system, how precise the loop, the travellers who live inside it will still carry hearts that beat in years, not centuries. The next part of our journey drifts toward that hidden limit, not the weakness of the machine, but the endurance of the mind and the loneliness of generations that live too long between stars. The trail of our story now carries us into the quietest part of all, the space not between galaxies, but between generations. If we ever truly set out to cross the stars, the journey would not belong to one lifetime. It would stretch across hundreds, maybe thousands of years. A ship large enough to carry a community would need to become more than transportation. It would need to become a world in itself. Within its walls, people would be born, grow, love, dream, and die, all without ever seeing the destination their ancestors promised them. The stars outside would barely seem to move. The voyage would not be a trip through space. It would be a civilization unfolding in slow motion. Imagine standing inside that ship. The walls hum softly with recycled air. Artificial gravity pulls faintly beneath your feet. Beyond the windows, there is only darkness, the kind that feels endless, the kind that begins to look back at you. You know that somewhere ahead lies another star, but it might as well be a myth. The light from that destination is older than any language you speak. Outside, everything is motionless. Inside, life continues because it must. Psychologists who study isolation already understand the first whisper of what that might feel like. They've seen it in Antarctic stations buried under months of darkness, in submarines that wander under the sea, in simulated missions like Mars 500, where volunteers lived for over a year in a sealed habitat, rehearsing the patience that space will one day require. In every one of these places, the same story repeats. Time begins to lose its edges. The calendar remains, but the meaning of days drifts. Conversations circle, moods rise and fall like tides, and the smallest detail, the sound of another person's footsteps, the rhythm of a shared meal, becomes precious. Now stretch that experience not for months, but for centuries. Imagine children born aboard who will never walk on soil, who will never feel sunlight except as a soft lamp glow filtered through glass. To them, the stories of Earth would sound like folklore, tales of oceans and rain, of wind moving through leaves. The older generations would tell those stories as prayers, trying to keep memory alive. But as the years turn, memory would become legend, and legend would become myth. A few might still believe that a real planet waits somewhere ahead, but for most, the ship itself would become the only world they know. Sociologists call this the generation ship paradox. The longer the journey, the more likely it is that the descendants of the travellers will forget why they left in the first place. The mission becomes history, then ritual, then background noise. The purpose fades while life itself continues. And perhaps that's inevitable, because the human mind was never built for forever. We live by stories with beginnings and endings. A voyage without either becomes something else entirely. There would still be joy, of course. Laughter in the narrow hallways, festivals marking the slow passage of seasons made by light. Friendships born in the rhythm of maintenance and renewal. But beneath it all, there would be an undertone of longing, like the low hum of the ship itself. The longing wouldn't be for a specific place, but for a feeling, the sense of being part of something larger, the kind of belonging that Earth gives freely with every sunrise. Out here, surrounded by endless dark, that feeling would need to be built from scratch, generation after generation. It's not impossible to imagine people finding meaning in that. After all, every society, no matter where it begins, finds its own rituals. On such a ship, the crew might mark time not by years, but by rotations of maintenance cycles, harvests from hydroponic gardens, or the births of children who will one day inherit the voyage. Art would adapt. Songs about stars that never change, poems about ancestors who left a planet no one remembers. Language itself might evolve into new forms, shaped by the rhythms of life in a closed world. The stars outside would remain, silent witnesses to a culture that grows like coral in the dark. And yet, even in its beauty, there would be an ache, a quiet question that no generation could quite silence. Why keep going? If no one who begins the journey will ever see its end, is the journey still worth it? Maybe that's the real test such a voyage would pose, not of technology or endurance, but of faith. Faith in continuity, in the idea that existence itself is reason enough. Perhaps the travellers would come to see the destination not as a place, but as a direction. A promise they keep moving toward, even if they never arrive. It's possible that, over many centuries, the purpose would shift completely. The ship might stop seeing itself as temporary. Its people might stop thinking of themselves as travellers. They would be citizens of a moving world, a place whose sky is always the same. Maybe by the 1000th generation, they would have forgotten Earth entirely, not out of neglect, but because they would have built something new. Their myths might describe the galaxy as an infinite sea, their home as a living island gliding through it. The journey would have become the destination. When we imagine such futures, it's easy to focus on loneliness, the distance, the disconnection, the loss of origin. But there's another way to see it. Every generation on Earth is already part of a voyage that began long before they were born and will continue long after they're gone. The difference is only in scale. The sunlight on your skin left the sun 8 minutes ago. The carbon in your body once drifted through the galaxy before settling here. Even now, we're all passengers, each lifetime a small chapter in a story that spans billions of years. In that light, a generation ship doesn't sound so alien. It sounds like a mirror of what we already are, living within cycles we don't always see, caring for a vessel we didn't build but must keep alive. Whether our ship is made of metal or ocean and sky, the responsibility is the same: to pass it on in working order, to keep it habitable, to keep its story alive. So perhaps the loneliness between generations isn't loneliness at all. Perhaps it's continuity, the handoff between those who remember the beginning and those who must believe in the unseen end. The meaning of the journey doesn't lie in its destination, but in the care that each generation gives to the next. And when you think of it that way, our Earth is already such a ship, spinning through the black, carrying billions of souls who will never see where this voyage ends. The walls hum with recycled air, the oceans are our life support, the forests are oxygen tanks. We may never leave the Milky Way, but we are already travelling together, slowly, beautifully, through time. From here, our story drifts toward another kind of silence. Not the distance between generations, but the distance between minds. Because even if life endures, even if ships and stations survive, there is one more limit waiting for us. The limit of communication itself, the soft boundary where light becomes too slow to keep up with longing. Our quiet exploration now turns towards something invisible but absolute, the speed at which silence travels. We've spent our lives surrounded by the hum of communication, voices across rooms, signals through the air, words crossing oceans in an instant. It's so easy to forget that even these invisible threads have a speed limit, and that the universe, in its quiet discipline, enforces it with precision. That limit, as always, is the pace of light. It connects us, but it also divides us. It lets us see the past, but never quite catch the present. It is the measure of how far a voice can go before it fades into history. Here on Earth, light feels instant. You flip a switch, and a room brightens without pause. You speak into a phone, and your voice seems to leap across continents. But distance hides delay. When astronauts on the moon spoke to mission control, their voices returned with a pause, barely noticeable, just over a second, but enough for emotion to feel delayed, like breathing through glass. The farther out you go, the longer that pause becomes. To Mars, messages take anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes to arrive, depending on where the planets are in their orbits. A conversation there can no longer flow. It becomes a form of letter writing. One question asked under a red sky, and the answer arriving long after the stars have shifted. Now stretch that gap into the scale of galaxies. Andromeda, our nearest large neighbour, is 2.5 million light-years away. A message sent there tonight would not arrive until long after the continents have changed, after the mountains have crumbled, after everything we know has faded into archaeology. And if anyone there replied, their message would take another 2.5 million years to return. It's a conversation where each reply takes longer than civilization itself. At that scale, communication ceases to be communication at all. it becomes archaeology in real time. Each signal a fossil waiting to be uncovered. That's why, when we search for other civilizations, we listen for signals that may already be ancient. Every radio wave we detect from the deep sky left its source millions or billions of years ago. If anyone sent them, they might be long gone. The silence we hear is not necessarily absence, it's delay. The universe is still talking. We're just too young to hear most of its words. Even so, our desire to send messages persists. Across decades, humanity has launched small greetings into the dark, golden records aboard the Voyager probes, each carrying music, sounds of nature, greetings in dozens of languages. Those records will drift for billions of years, carrying a single message. We were here and we wanted to say hello. They move at a steady pace, silent ambassadors of a species that could not stop trying to reach beyond itself. By the time those records pass another star, if they ever do, our world may be unrecognizable. But that doesn't make the message meaningless. It makes it timeless. In the universe's immense patience, even a whisper can last forever. Still, there's a kind of sadness woven into that hope. Because even if we could build starships and scatter ourselves among the stars, the delay would remain. A colony 10 light years away could send a message to Earth, but it would arrive 10 years later. The reply would take another 10. A generation would be born and die between every question and answer. Empires could rise and vanish before a conversation finished. At such scales, governance, friendship, even family as we understand it, begin to lose shape. Communication would not stop, it would evolve, maybe into art, or ritual, or some slower form of language that does not depend on immediate response. Perhaps that's the universe's way of teaching us the value of listening. In a cosmos where speech takes millennia, patience becomes the only real form of intelligence. To send a signal you will never hear answered, that is a profound act of faith. It is the same act we perform every time we plant a tree, write a poem, or raise a child. We do it not for ourselves, but for those who might someday receive it. The silence between stars is not punishment, it's structure. It's what allows each galaxy to develop its own rhythm, its own song. If everything could speak instantly, there would be no space for difference, no pause for individuality. The delay between us and everything else is what creates identity. It is, in its way, a kindness. The universe's way of giving every voice its own quiet room to echo in before joining the larger chorus. And yet, that silence can still feel unbearable. Imagine a traveller drifting far from home, sending one last message into the black. They would know, deep down, that no one would ever hear it, at least not within any time they could understand. But still they'd speak. They'd send their words outward. Because even in isolation, expression is its own comfort. Maybe the universe listens in ways we don't yet comprehend. Maybe every word spoken into the void bends space just enough to leave a trace, a wrinkle, a memory. Maybe that's how meaning survives. It's worth remembering that even here, on this small blue world, we live with echoes. The light you see from the sun left it 8 minutes ago. The glow from the stars overhead is thousands of years old. Every sunrise and every starlight evening are technically glimpses of the past. The universe always speaks with a delay, and yet, somehow, we still feel present in it. Maybe presence itself isn't about synchronization, but about participation, about being part of the conversation, no matter how long it takes to answer. So when we look up and hear nothing, perhaps that's not emptiness, but timing. Perhaps the messages of others are still on their way, crossing the long distances of night, carrying their own stories, their own music, their own questions. And when they finally reach us, whether in 1,000 years or 1 billion, we might no longer be here to listen, but something will be, and that will be enough. The universe's silence, then, is not absolute. It is filled with potential replies, all travelling at their own patient pace. It asks us to listen longer than we thought possible, to measure connection not in minutes or days, but in light years and hope. The speed of silence is slow, but it is steady, and if you wait long enough, even silence begins to sound like song. If we follow that faint sound further, it leads us to the next truth, that silence doesn't just stretch across space, it also stretches across time and culture, reshaping memory itself. Because when worlds grow too far apart, when languages drift, even the words we once shared begin to change, until the echoes that return to us are from a world we no longer recognize. From here, the story opens into a softer kind of distance, not measured in kilometers or light years, but in memory. For even if we could reach the stars, even if we found ways to cross time and silence, another limit would remain: the slow unravelling of shared meaning. Words drift, cultures bend. The same story told far from home becomes something new, and just as light stretches as it travels, so too do the thoughts we send across the dark, elongated, distorted, beautiful in ways we never intended. Imagine a future where humanity is scattered among the stars. Perhaps there are colonies orbiting distant suns, cities carved into the cliffs of alien moons, domes glowing faintly on planets with skies the colour of memory. Each of these worlds would begin as an echo of Earth. Familiar languages, familiar rituals, familiar songs. But centuries would pass. The speed of communication, limited by the slow patience of light, would make conversation between worlds nearly impossible. Messages sent across that space would take decades to arrive, and by the time a reply returned, generations would have changed. The meaning of the words might already have shifted. Languages are living things. Even on Earth, separated by oceans instead of stars, they transform within centuries. Words lose their edges, gain new ones, gather new shades of emotion. In isolation, this change accelerates. A word for home on one colony might, in time, come to mean something very different. Not a place of origin, but a direction of longing. A word for sun might come to describe the warmth of artificial light, the comfort of machinery that mimics a day that no one remembers. 1,000 years later, if those distant voices spoke back to Earth, our descendants might not recognize the sound of their own species in the reply. You can see the beginnings of this even now. Each generation inherits a world slightly changed from the one before. A world of new words, new technologies, new ways of thinking. Grandparents speak of things that no longer exist. Children use words that did not exist when their parents were born. Multiply that difference by the scale of galaxies, and culture itself begins to fracture into constellations of meaning, each one glowing on its own timeline. Perhaps, far in the future, one of those distant civilizations might point their instruments toward the faint radio echo of Earth. They would listen carefully to the ancient signals that left our world long before they were born. They would hear our music, our laughter, our news. Perhaps even the hum of our first transmission still drifting outward through the cosmic sea. But to them, those sounds would be artifacts. The languages would be lost. The jokes, the songs, the fears would be as mysterious as the carvings of an extinct animal. Earth, in their imagination, would become legend. Not a memory, but a myth. And maybe that's what always happens. Every civilization eventually becomes myth to those who come after. The Greeks once wrote of their gods as if they were neighbours. The Egyptians carved their prayers into stone, certain that the symbols would speak forever. Now we look at those carvings with awe, but the voices that made them are gone. Their meanings survive only as echoes softened by time, refracted through translation. The universe does the same thing, only slower. It turns truth into story, and story into starlight. There is beauty in that too, because even as meaning shifts, it never disappears completely. Every transformation is also a continuation. The music changes key, but the melody remains. the myth that replaces memory still carries a trace of the original truth, like the scent of smoke that lingers after a fire. Perhaps this is how ideas evolve, by travelling farther than their makers could ever go, reshaped by each new listener. On a generation ship drifting between stars, memory would have to be curated with care. There would be archivists and storytellers, people whose task is to keep the past alive. They would pass on songs, histories, languages and rituals, knowing that every retelling changes them a little. They might not resist that change, but guide it. The way a gardener shapes a vine without stopping it from growing. In the absence of direct connection to Earth, culture would become organic, adapting to its new environment like a living creature. And perhaps, after enough centuries, one of those descendants might wonder whether Earth was ever real at all. Maybe they would think of it the way we think of Eden, a paradise that once existed, lost through some distant forgetting. They might look at old maps and see poetry instead of geography. Earth, to them, could mean hope, or origin, or simply home, a word too deep for definition. Back on Earth, if we could somehow watch this unfold, we might feel sadness at that loss. But perhaps we shouldn't. Forgetting, after all, is not only erasure, it's also transformation. When memory fractures, it spreads light in new directions. It creates diversity, resilience, new ways to understand what it means to be human. The very process that dissolves unity is also what ensures survival. The story changes, but the telling continues. Think of how our own myths began. Once, a group of humans huddled around a fire telling stories of why the sun rises, or where lightning comes from. Those stories were wrong in their details, but right in their spirit. They explained the world through wonder. Thousands of years later, we do the same thing with telescopes and equations. The language has changed, but the impulse is the same. To look into the dark and ask what's out there, and who we are in relation to it. So maybe the fracturing of memory isn't something to mourn. Maybe it's the universe's way of ensuring that curiosity never dies, that every fragment of humanity scattered across time and space keeps rediscovering what it means to be alive. In a way, the act of forgetting becomes sacred. It guarantees that every generation must learn the world anew, finding fresh words for the same old awe. One day, far in the future, when someone looks up at the Milky Way from a distant colony, they might not remember the name of the planet that first taught them to dream, but the feeling of wonder, the quiet pull of the stars, will still be there. That feeling doesn't belong to language. It belongs to existence itself. From here, the story drifts onward, to the next inevitable realization, that as distance grows and memories splinter, even knowledge, the most structured thing we've ever made, begins to localize, to become small, specific, and deeply personal. And maybe, within that smallness, we will rediscover what wisdom was always meant to be. Our path now carries us to a quieter revelation, one that unfolds not in the stars or the silence between them, but in the mind. For even if humanity could scatter across the galaxy, if colonies and ships and habitats endured for millennia, the knowledge we carry would not remain whole. Like language, it would begin to drift, to bend and reshape itself around the small realities of each world. Wisdom would cease to be something universal and become something local, born from the landscapes, skies, and needs of the people who live beneath them. It's easy to think of knowledge as permanent, like a library carved into stone, but libraries are living things. They breathe with the people who visit them. Books decay, words fall out of fashion, meanings shift. The truths that remain are not those written in ink, but those renewed in practice. A fact is just a frozen moment of understanding. To stay alive, it must keep being rediscovered. And that, in the end, is what knowledge really is. A conversation between what we learn and what we live. Now imagine that conversation stretching across light years. A colony built under a red dwarf sun would see the world in deeper, dimmer colours. Their eyes, Their tools, their rituals would adapt to that light. A colony on a bright blue planet with twice Earth's gravity would move more slowly, think more carefully about energy and balance. Their technology would mirror their environment, their philosophy shaped by the air they breathe. In time, what began as the same science, the same shared understanding of the universe, would diverge into countless ways of seeing. Each would be right, but none would be whole. The truths that hold on Earth might feel irrelevant beneath a different sky. That's not loss, it's evolution. Knowledge is not a tower reaching upward. It's more like a forest. Many trees rooted in the same soil, growing in different directions. Some fall and nourish the ground. Others rise higher to catch the light. If humanity spreads among the stars, our wisdom will branch this way too. Each world will become its own grove of thought, shaped by the winds that touch it. Here on Earth, we already see the early signs of that branching. The sciences we build in one region grow differently in another. The same questions take new shapes when asked in new languages: art, religion, philosophy. They've always been local ways of interpreting the same infinite sky. The further apart we drift, the more our understanding mirrors the diversity of life itself. And maybe that's how it was meant to be. Perhaps knowledge was never supposed to be singular, but plural, a chorus of perspectives singing softly across the void. But there's a quiet danger hidden in that beauty. Connection makes correction possible. When worlds can speak to each other, ideas can be tested, refined, made stronger. When distance grows, that feedback fades. Mistakes can harden into dogma. Myths can masquerade as facts. Each civilization becomes its own echo chamber, shaping reality according to what it needs to believe. Over time, the stars could fill with 1,000 different versions of truth, none of them wrong, but none of them able to hear the others. Still, even that isn't entirely bleak, because perhaps knowledge's true purpose isn't accumulation, but renewal. Every isolated world, every quiet community would have to relearn the same lessons: gravity, chemistry, kindness. They would rediscover fire, rediscover flight, rediscover the wonder of the sky. And in doing so, they'd find meaning again. The rediscovery itself would keep the species alive. The same stars that guided the first sailors on Earth would guide their descendants, even if they'd forgotten the names. Some things, it seems, never vanish completely. They simply wait to be remembered. In that sense, knowledge becoming local is not an end of progress, but a return to intimacy. We would no longer chase grand unifying theories, but instead learn the small harmonies of our own environments. How to tend soil on a new world, how to listen to its winds, how to live within the seasons of a different sun. The idea of wisdom would shift from conquering nature to understanding one's place in it. Maybe across the galaxy, humanity would finally learn humility. Imagine a future historian on one of those distant colonies, a child of a world we can't yet imagine. They might look at their sky, filled with unknown constellations, and wonder if anyone else is out there. In their hand, they might hold a fragment of an old recording, a melody, a phrase, maybe the sound of ocean waves, relics of an origin so ancient it's barely believable. They might listen, close their eyes, and feel something familiar stir. They might not know the word Earth, but they would understand the emotion behind it: belonging. Back here, now, on our still young planet, we can already see how such forgetting begins. The internet, the archives, the recording, they feel permanent, but they are fragile. Data decays, devices fail. The information we store today will, in a few centuries, be as mysterious as ancient scripts carved in clay. What survives will not be the code or the language, but the spirit, the desire to know, to preserve, to remember. That desire is what carries forward, no matter the form it takes. Perhaps then, the future of knowledge is not preservation, but renewal, a cycle of learning and rediscovery that mirrors the rhythm of stars being born and dying. Just as the elements that make our bodies once lived in older suns, so too will the thoughts we think now find new life in minds yet unborn. Across all distances and all forgetting, the act of wonder will remain. And maybe that is what wisdom truly means. Not to hold all knowledge, but to accept that it will always be incomplete. To understand that truth changes shape, that it belongs to whoever tends it in their own time and place. The universe is too large for any mind to know completely, but it is just the right size for infinite curiosity. As our story turns from here, we begin to see the larger pattern, that isolation does not only shape knowledge and culture, but evolution itself. The same distances that separate our thoughts also separate our bodies, our genes, our futures. Over long enough time, even humanity will begin to diverge into new forms, not from conflict but from adaptation, each branch learning to survive in its own corner of the galaxy. And in that quiet branching, the story of life itself continues to unfold, as it always has, endlessly, beautifully, and never in the same way twice. If we follow the thread a little further, we find ourselves standing on the quiet shores of possibility. Imagine for a moment that humanity has done what once seemed impossible, spread beyond Earth, beyond the Sun, beyond even the Milky Way's familiar arms. Across countless centuries we've reached the stars. But distance, even when conquered by technology, still works its slow magic. Time and separation have always been nature's most patient sculptors. In that silence between worlds, evolution begins again. Not in a laboratory or by deliberate choice, but in the quiet, ordinary way it always has, by shaping life to fit the places it inhabits. On Earth, we can already see the preview of that process. A fish becomes a creature of land. A bird, once small and brown, finds colour and purpose in an island forest. The beak of a finch changes to fit the seeds it finds. Given enough time, small differences turn into new songs of being. It's no tragedy, it's nature's form of curiosity. And if we carry ourselves to other worlds, we will not be immune to that same curiosity of the universe. Imagine a world orbiting a red star, its sky dim but steady, its light stretching longer toward the orange and deep gold. People living there for generations might find their eyes adapting to that dimmer glow, their skin evolving to capture more warmth from what little sunlight remains. On a heavy world, with stronger gravity, their bones might grow thicker, their muscles denser, every step a quiet act of endurance. On a world with lower gravity, movement might become light and graceful, gestures drawn out like a slow dance. Over millennia, humanity could become many things. Taller, shorter, darker, paler, even shaped by the chemistry of new soils and skies. Each world would craft its own version of human, tuned perfectly to its environment, like instruments tuned to different keys of the same cosmic song. Such divergence is not a loss of identity, it's an expansion of meaning. Humanity would no longer be a single melody, but a symphony. Our descendants would look up at the stars and see, not strangers, but distant cousins, each world singing its own verse of the same story. They might no longer look like us, but they would carry echoes of our laughter, our questions, our defiance against silence. Evolution, after all, does not erase, it remembers differently. Perhaps somewhere far into the future, a traveller from one of these worlds will look back through history and wonder what their ancestors were like. They might find old records, faint photographs, the outlines of faces that seem both familiar and alien. They might touch their own skin and realise that they too are made from Earth's long story. That even across galaxies, the pattern of origin still glows inside every cell. They might feel a kind of nostalgia for a planet they've never seen. And maybe that's the real inheritance we leave behind. Not our form, but our longing. It's comforting to think that this kind of transformation isn't an ending. It's continuity by other means. When Darwin looked at the branching tree of life, he saw that every divergence was also connection. Every leaf linked by the same trunk beneath. The same will be true for us. The distances between our future selves will be vast, but the roots will always lead back to the same soil, the same oceans, the same night sky that first taught us to wonder. You can already feel the beginnings of that branching in the way our technology reshapes us. We carry machines that think, prosthetics that respond like muscle, implants that listen and learn. These are not the tools of separation, but the beginnings of adaptation. A new layer of evolution that moves at the pace of imagination rather than generations. Someday the descendants of humanity might merge with their machines so fully that biology itself becomes just one language among many. They might no longer speak in heartbeats and breath, but in patterns of light and pulse, communicating across space not with sound but with memory. Even so, something of the human will remain. That flicker of curiosity, the need to create stories, to find connection in the vastness. No matter how much our bodies or minds change, the impulse to look outward will stay. Maybe that's the real constant in our evolution. Not our form, but our wonder. It's tempting to think of these futures as departures, as humanity breaking apart into species that can no longer know each other. But perhaps it's better to imagine them as harmonies. Each adaptation, each branch, each new kind of person adds texture to the universe's song. Where we once saw difference, we might someday hear music. The galaxy, filled with these countless variations of life, would not be a field of strangers but a chorus of diversity, each voice necessary, each one irreplaceable. On Earth, islands are nature's favourite laboratories. When creatures become isolated, they change, not to reject what they were, but to better fit where they are. Galapagos finches, Australian marsupials, even tiny lichens that cling to Arctic stone. Each tells a story of how life, when separated, finds new rhythms. Across the stars, the same will happen to us. Isolation will turn to invention. Distance will become creativity. And one day, if some of these worlds should meet again, if ships built by different descendants of the same ancient species were to pass in the dark, they might not recognize one another immediately, but perhaps in the light of recognition, they'd see what connects them more than what divides them. They'd see the same spark in each other's eyes, a reminder that all diversity begins with the same longing to survive, to belong, to know. The future, then, is not a single road but a branching river, flowing in countless directions. Some branches will merge, others will vanish, and new ones will appear where none were expected. That's what makes life so miraculous. It doesn't need permission to continue. It just does. It finds ways. It changes shape, but not essence. And maybe that's the universe's quiet gift, that even in separation, everything remains connected by what it came from. The galaxies drift apart, yet they all trace back to the same beginning. Stars are born and die, but the elements they scatter feed the next generation of light. Humanity will be no different. We will scatter, we will evolve, but the story will go on. From here, the story widens still further into a thought both scientific and poetic, that perhaps this tendency toward distance and difference is not random at all, but designed into the fabric of things. That every law of motion, every whisper of energy, every breath of physics works together to create space, the space that allows individuality, solitude, and creation. The next step in our journey leads us there, into the realization that the universe itself seems to prefer separation, as if distance were not a flaw in its design, but the very thing that makes beauty possible. From here, the path widens again, away from the soft shapes of evolution and towards something even older, the architecture that holds everything together. The more we learn about the universe, the more it seems to prefer distance. Every law, Every constant, every faint vibration of space and time seems to conspire in one quiet direction, to keep things apart, to make room for solitude. At first, that sounds lonely, but when you look closer, it begins to feel like design, not a cold one, but a deliberate kind of kindness. The galaxies themselves tell this story. Once, long ago, the universe was crowded and bright. Matter pressed close, heat filled every corner, and the first light couldn't travel far without being swallowed again. But as the universe expanded, it began to cool and open. The same energy that once bound everything together started to stretch the fabric of space. What we call dark energy, that mysterious push hidden inside the equations, is really the universe's way of giving everything room to breathe. It is not a violent force, but a gentle one, quiet and constant, expanding the canvas so that each galaxy can have its own sky. If we could paint physics, perhaps we would see it as an artist of solitude, each stroke made with precision and patience. Gravity, that old sculptor, draws matter inward, creating suns, planets, and the small places where life can bloom. But gravity never works alone. Opposite it, there is the expansion of space pulling outward, softening the grip of every cluster. Between them, a perfect balance, attraction and release, intimacy and distance. The universe, it seems, knows that closeness without space becomes collapse, and separation without connection becomes emptiness. So it weaves the two together, a cosmic rhythm of holding and letting go. Einstein's relativity adds another brushstroke to that design. It tells us that time itself bends under the weight of matter, that every mass carries a small gravity of its own, stretching the seconds around it. The faster we move, the slower time becomes, as if motion itself creates a pocket of delay, a private moment inside the rush. Even time, it seems, does not want to move in unison. It prefers a soft scattering of perspectives, each one valid, each one true from its own point of view. The universe, in this way, is not a single clock, but a choir of clocks, each ticking at its own pace, each adding harmony to the song of existence. At smaller scales, the pattern continues. In the quantum world, that trembling stage beneath all reality, there are no solid boundaries, only probabilities and pauses. Every particle is a question waiting to be answered, every answer a new question. It's as though the universe refuses to give everything away at once. It keeps its secrets scattered in tiny distances between knowing and not knowing. The more we look, the more the pattern repeats. A world built from spaces, not from things, from relationships, not from objects. Even heat itself, that most ordinary form of energy, reveals the same truth. When matter moves, when particles collide or accelerate, they generate warmth, not as punishment, but as a signature of effort. In physics, there's an idea called the Unruh effect, which says that motion through empty space can create the sensation of heat, as if the act of existing, of moving through the universe's endless fabric, leaves behind a faint shimmer of warmth. You could think of it as the body heat of being. Even in the coldest corners of creation, life and motion share that quiet glow, like embers hidden under snow. And then there is entropy, the gentle tide that ensures nothing stays perfectly ordered for long. It might seem like decay, but really it's balance again. Entropy is how the universe spreads out its energy, ensuring that no single place becomes too crowded with perfection. It's what allows time to have direction, what gives meaning to change. Without entropy, nothing would ever evolve. Even in the grandest sense, the universe keeps its promise to distance, spreading warmth, light, and information outward until everything finds its own calm. When you gather these laws together, relativity, quantum uncertainty, expansion, entropy, they begin to sound less like separate discoveries and more like verses of one quiet poem. They all describe a world that resists compression, that chooses openness over confinement. Every structure, from atoms to galaxies, depends on space between its parts. Even your body is more empty than solid. The atoms that make you are mostly space, tiny islands of matter held apart by invisible forces. You are quite literally a constellation of distances. Maybe that's the hidden wisdom behind it all. That distance is not a flaw, but the condition for existence. Without the space between things, there would be no motion, no contrast, no individuality. Light could not travel, music could not vibrate, life could not breathe. The universe keeps things apart so that they can become themselves. It is separation that allows intimacy to mean something. Think of how stars are born. Clouds of gas gather under gravity's pull, until pressure ignites them into light. But if that gas had stayed scattered forever, there would be no stars, and if it had collapsed completely, there would be no life. Somewhere in between, in that delicate pause between gathering and release, lies creation. The same rhythm beats through everything. Contraction, expansion, balance. The galaxies drift apart not because the universe is dying, but because it is still unfolding, still making room for what comes next. In that sense, we might say the cosmos is designed not for unity, but for harmony, a harmony of solitude. Each world, each star, each atom hums its own quiet note, and together they form the background music of being. The silence we sometimes mistake for emptiness is full of these vibrations. We live inside them, shaped by them, unaware that we too are part of their song. Perhaps that is why loneliness feels so heavy, not because distance is unnatural, but because we are built from it and we feel its echo within us. We are made of separations, atoms held apart, stars scattered across darkness. And yet we yearn for connection. The tension between those two truths is what gives our lives their shape. So the next time you look at the night sky, think of it not as a picture of remoteness, but as a portrait of balance. Each point of light hangs where it must, held in place by the same invisible agreements that hold you together. The universe is not a cold expanse. It is a patient architecture of space, built to cradle every difference and let it shine. And yet even the most patient structures fade. The expansion that gives everything room will one day stretch the distances so far that even light itself will fail to bridge them. Stars will vanish from view. The sky will grow quiet. The same laws that built the universe will gently dim it. And in that dimming, a new kind of beauty will emerge. A beauty born from memory, from what the universe once was and what it chose to remember before the dark. The trail of our story now drifts toward the far horizon of time, to an age so distant that even imagination feels thin there. Every moment as the universe expands, light stretches, stars drift apart, and space grows larger between every point. It's easy to think of the cosmos as eternal, but what we see tonight, the scatter of stars, the spiraling arms, the faint silver wash of the Milky Way, is not permanent. It's the brief, glittering middle of a much longer story. And like all stories, it will one day fade from view. If you could stay awake for billions of years, watching from some quiet planet, you would see it happen slowly. One by one, the galaxies beyond our local group, the cluster that holds the Milky Way, Andromeda, and a few small companions, would begin to drift away. Not because they're moving through space, but because space itself is stretching. The light from their stars would grow weaker, redder, dimming into invisibility as it stretched beyond what our eyes or instruments can detect. This isn't speed in the ordinary sense, it's expansion, the very fabric of reality breathing outward. And no matter how fast we might travel, we can't outrun it. It isn't the galaxies fleeing us, it's the distance between everything growing. Someday, far in the future, all that will remain visible to us will be the faint glow of our own merged galaxy. The Milky Way and Andromeda, twined together in a slow cosmic dance, forming a single island of light adrift in the dark. Everything else will have slipped beyond the cosmic horizon, carried away faster than light by the expansion of space itself. The universe will not be emptier, but it will look that way, as if the sky has forgotten its own youth. Even the oldest light we can still see, the cosmic microwave background and the soft afterglow of creation itself, is fading. It began as something unimaginably bright, the glare of the newborn universe, when everything was dense and hot and new. Over billions of years, as space expanded, that light stretched until it cooled into a faint radio whisper. Today it glows at just a few degrees above absolute zero, a ghostly warmth that fills every direction. It is, quite literally, the memory of the universe's first dawn. But as the expansion continues, that glow too will dim, its waves stretched longer and longer until they dissolve into silence. When that happens, no observer, not even the most patient, will be able to see evidence of the Big Bang. The record of the beginning will fade, not erased by catastrophe, but by gentleness, the quiet work of time itself. In that far future, astronomers on some distant world will look up and see only their own galaxy. The sky will be dark and still, and the universe will seem small. They will have no way of knowing that once it was filled with billions of galaxies, that beyond their horizon lies a vastness now forever hidden. It's a strange and humbling thought, that we live at the one moment when the universe still remembers itself. We stand in a narrow window of cosmic history, when the sky is still rich with evidence of its origin, when light from distant galaxies still finds us, when the background glow of creation still hums faintly across the dark. Millions of years ago, it was too bright to see. Millions of years from now, it will be too dim. But tonight, right now, the universe is perfectly visible, a balance between mystery and memory. Some philosophers and scientists call this coincidence the anthropic principle, which is a formal way of saying we are here at a time when being here is possible. But there's another, gentler way to understand it. Perhaps we exist in this moment not because it was meant for us, but because this is when the universe can be known, when consciousness has the light it needs to see where it came from. In this narrow window, the cosmos has given itself eyes, through us, to look back on its own beginning. We're not outside the story, we are the part that remembers. That realization gives the fading sky a different meaning. The vanishing of light is not loss, it's completion. The universe is not dying, it is maturing, cooling into quietness after a long and radiant youth. Even darkness, when you look at it closely, carries beauty. It's the same beauty you see in the dimming of a fire at night, the embers glowing softly as they surrender their last warmth to the air. The universe will cool that way, not all at once, but with grace. Perhaps by then new forms of life will have adapted to the silence. Not biological in the way we know it, but something more subtle. Patterns of energy living in the low hum of the remaining stars, minds that think in slow rhythms, each thought stretching across centuries. They might not see galaxies, but they will still sense the faint structure left behind, gravity's ghost, the delicate web that once held everything together. And in their own way, they will wonder too. Even now, when we look out at the night, we are seeing into memory. The light from the nearest star, apart from our sun, took 4 years to reach us. From the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.5 million. From the most distant galaxies, billions of years. Every star is a message from the past, a story told in photons. The sky above you tonight is not the sky as it is, it's the sky as it was. We live surrounded by ghosts of light, and every one of them is a reminder that time and beauty are the same thing written at different speeds. When the last of those lights fade, it won't mean the end of meaning. It will mean that meaning has done its work, that the universe has told its story in full, from brightness to stillness, from chaos to calm. We will never see that final quiet, but we can feel its promise already, like the hush that follows a song. So the next time you look up at the stars, remember that you are looking into memory, into the universe's own reflection. What you see shining there is not just light from the past, but proof that remembering itself can be beautiful. The galaxies will one day disappear from view, but for now, they are still here, still speaking, still writing their names in the sky for anyone who cares to look. And as the story drifts onward, we'll turn from the fading of the cosmos toward its deeper silence, the kind that holds not just space, but possibility. Because if the sky forgets and the light dims, perhaps that's only to make room for something else, for the quiet emergence of meaning itself, rare as life but luminous in its own right. If we follow the thread a little further, we enter a silence that isn't empty at all, a silence filled with waiting. For as long as we've looked up, we've wondered whether anyone else might be doing the same. The night sky feels too vast, too intricate, too alive with possibility for us to be its only witnesses. And yet, century after century, telescope after telescope, the stars remain quiet. We listen, but no one answers. This quiet question has a name, the Fermi paradox, but the name matters less than the feeling, the ache of listening for a voice that might never come. When you think of it softly, the question becomes almost tender. If anyone else exists, they too are singing into their own sky, unheard. Their light, their signals might still be on their way, rippling across the cosmic sea, too faint or too far for us to receive. The silence between stars may not mean absence, it may simply mean timing. Perhaps the universe is filled with distant songs still travelling toward us, just slow enough that we will never hear them. It's strange how the absence of evidence can feel heavier than evidence itself. Every time our instruments scan a patch of sky, every time a radio dish turns its ear toward the dark, we hope for a flicker, a pattern, a rhythm that whispers, "We're here too." But so far, the only signals we've caught are natural. The hum of pulsars, the whisper of interstellar hydrogen, the soft hiss of the universe's own background glow. No voices, no greetings, just the steady breath of physics. This silence has led some to imagine what scientists call the Great Filter, the idea that there may be barriers to life or intelligence that most civilizations cannot pass. Maybe it's rare for life to begin. Maybe it's rarer still for it to endure. Perhaps somewhere between fire and language, between atoms and awareness, the path simply narrows until only a few make it through. But to imagine that as tragedy might be missing the point. What if the rarity of life isn't a warning, but a sign of its value? Precious things, after all, are precious because they are rare. Think of a single flower growing on a barren plain. Its existence doesn't need to be justified by a field of others like it. Its beauty is in its singularity. In the same way, a lonely planet filled with life is not a failure of abundance, it's a miracle of circumstance. To be rare is to be extraordinary. The silence between stars doesn't make life insignificant, it makes it luminous. It means that each world that harbours it is a kind of treasure, glowing softly against the dark. It's also possible that the silence is not the universe's doing, but ours. We listen for messages written in our own languages, in our own frequencies, expecting the universe to speak the way we do. But perhaps communication, out there, takes forms we can't yet imagine. Signals written in magnetism or geometry, consciousnesses that think in patterns of light or gravity instead of sound. If they exist, they might not even realise that silence bothers us. They might not be ignoring us at all. They might simply live in a rhythm of time so vast that our whole civilization passes like a blink. And perhaps they too are asking the same question, looking out at their own sky, wondering why it's so quiet. Maybe they send their messages, their probes, their music into the dark just as we have, and wait for a reply that never comes. If the universe is truly filled with such unheard songs, then maybe the silence isn't an absence at all, but a kind of harmony, each civilization playing its own note, unaware that together they make a grand, unintentional symphony. Even if we never find them, the act of searching changes us. The very effort of listening teaches humility. We begin to realize that our place in the cosmos is not small but specific. We are the eyes and ears of one tiny corner of a galaxy, awake for a brief moment, aware enough to wonder. The silence reminds us of the fragility of that awareness, how easily it could have never happened at all. Sometimes, late at night, astronomers talk about what it would mean to finally hear a signal. Some dream it would unite us, that we'd forget our divisions and look outward together. Others think it would humble us, a reminder that we are not alone, not exceptional, just one branch on an endless tree. But maybe the truth is simpler. Even if no one ever calls back, the act of asking the question gives meaning. Wonder itself is the conversation. Curiosity is the language we share with the cosmos, even if the cosmos never replies. There's something almost spiritual in that. The silence between stars becomes a mirror, reflecting our own longing back to us. It reminds us how much we care, how deeply we wish to be connected, and that desire, that gentle ache to belong, may be the universe's way of keeping us reaching outward, not to find company, but to remember that connection itself is sacred. The same silence that humbles us also unites us. So when you look up at the night and see nothing but stillness, imagine instead that you are surrounded by music too slow to hear, conversations too long to finish, lives flickering and fading in rhythms beyond comprehension. The silence is not empty. It's full of possibility, the patient waiting of a universe still composing itself. And perhaps in that vast waiting, we'll begin to understand that life's purpose isn't to fill the silence, but to make it meaningful. Each spark of awareness, each song, each whispered dream is a small defiance against the void. Whether or not anyone answers, the fact that we speak at all is enough, because if there are others out there, they too are singing, into their own silence, under their own skies. And maybe, just maybe, that is the quiet miracle at the heart of it all, that the universe doesn't need to be crowded to be alive. One voice, one moment of awareness, one fragile world of light. That's enough to give the dark a reason to exist. And from that understanding, a new question begins to form, not about who else might be out there, but about what it means that we are here. If the universe is mostly silent, mostly empty, then perhaps the duty of being alive is not to escape that silence, but to bear witness to it, to keep the memory of its beauty alive while we can. From here, the story opens into a quiet kind of responsibility, not a burden, but a recognition. If the silence between stars means that life is rare, then awareness itself becomes sacred. Every thought, every song, every act of noticing turns into something larger than survival. It becomes the universe's way of seeing itself. When you stand outside at night and look up, what you're really seeing is the inside of time. The starlight falling on your eyes left its home long before you were born, maybe before humanity itself had language. That light has crossed a distance that defies imagination, and yet it still carries information, colour, heat, history. It travelled all that way not for you, not for anyone, but simply because that's what light does. And yet, in this small moment, you receive it. You let the universe enter you. You witness it. That act alone changes everything. We often think of intelligence as something that happens inside a brain, a private, localized miracle. But awareness is much bigger than that. It's the bridge between the world and its reflection. The moment you notice the glow of a candle, or the sound of rain, or the quiet heartbeat in your chest, the universe, for a moment, becomes conscious of itself. Without awareness, stars would still burn, galaxies would still spin, and atoms would still hum, but there would be no story. Awareness turns existence into experience, matter into meaning. That's why, if we are truly alone, our small consciousness becomes enormous in importance. Every sunset we admire, every question we ask might be the only time in the galaxy those things have ever been admired or asked. Every act of kindness, every discovery, every moment of wonder could be the Milky Way's one chance to know beauty. If there are no other witnesses, then we are not just observers, we are caretakers. It's a quiet kind of duty, one without command or demand. The universe doesn't ask us to save it, it simply gives us the chance to see it. Awareness in this sense is an act of gratitude. When we pay attention to a flower opening, to a storm forming, to the faint light of a galaxy millions of years away, we are saying thank you for being allowed to exist at all. Imagine for a moment that every living thing is a window. Through each of us, the universe gets to look out and admire itself from a slightly different angle. The bee sees a field of ultraviolet shapes. The whale listens to songs that fill the ocean. The tree feels the slow procession of sunlight. And you see patterns, tell stories, make sense of the chaos. Awareness doesn't belong to individuals. It's shared. It's like light refracted through billions of eyes, each showing a slightly different colour of truth. There's a strange humility in realising that consciousness might be the rarest phenomenon in the cosmos. Planets form easily, stars are everywhere, but minds that can wonder, imagine, dream, those are delicate. They require a chain of improbabilities stretching from stardust to self-reflection. To be aware is to stand at the end of that long improbability, holding a torch that burns only because 1,000 accidents lined up perfectly. It's not a privilege to take lightly. And if that's true, if we really are among the few beings able to look at the universe and say, I see you, then perhaps our greatest task is not to conquer or escape, but to preserve, to keep the light alive a little longer. Every civilization that reaches the stars will face the same truth, that the cosmos doesn't need us, but it is more complete with us in it. We give it a way to be known. That doesn't mean we must fill the galaxy with monuments or signals or noise. It might mean something simpler, that we live gently, that we learn to notice, that we teach others to wonder. Awareness spreads not only through technology, but through empathy, curiosity, and care. Each generation that learns to love the world extends the universe's memory of itself. Without that love, the lights might still shine, but no one would notice their beauty. You could think of consciousness as a form of stewardship. Just as a forest needs caretakers to protect its balance, the universe needs witnesses to protect its meaning. Without witnesses, the stars would still exist, but their light would fall on no eyes, their songs would echo in no minds. Awareness is what keeps the music from fading completely. It's easy to feel small when we think of the universe, to imagine ourselves as nothing more than dust. But awareness changes that scale. Dust does not wonder, dust does not love, dust does not write poetry about its own impermanence. The very act of knowing that we are fleeting makes our existence luminous. We are, each of us, both the observer and the observed, the mirror through which the cosmos admires its own reflection. Some philosophers once said that we are the way the universe dreams about itself. It's a comforting thought. Dreams, after all, don't last forever. They flicker, they shift, they vanish. But while they exist, they create worlds of extraordinary beauty. Perhaps that's all consciousness really is. The universe dreaming briefly of meaning before returning to rest. And maybe our duty is simply to dream well, to fill that fleeting moment with compassion, curiosity, and understanding. Because when we look back across everything we've learned, the distances, the physics, the silence, the loneliness, the thread that ties it all together isn't despair, it's reverence. To know that we are rare, that we are temporary, that the universe will go on without us, is not to feel small. It is to feel entrusted. If the stars are the body of the cosmos, then awareness is its soul. To care, to notice, to love even a single star is to complete the circle. Every act of kindness, every work of art, every question asked in the dark becomes a continuation of that sacred responsibility. So the next time you look at the sky, don't ask why it's so silent. Ask what the silence is asking of you. Maybe it's not waiting for an answer, but for attention, for someone to notice how beautiful it already is. And perhaps that's the quiet truth behind all our searching. That we don't need to fill the universe with noise to matter. We only need to stay awake long enough to see it clearly, to pass on that sight, and to remember that awareness, fragile, fleeting, and human, is the one flame worth protecting. From here, our story drifts gently toward its final reflection. The understanding that these boundaries, these distances, these limits we once thought of as cages, might be something else entirely. Perhaps they are what give our existence shape and meaning, the walls that turn endlessness into home. The path now carries us homeward, not back to Earth just yet, but toward a gentler kind of understanding. For all our dreams of infinity, all our yearning to cross the limits of light and time, there comes a moment when you begin to realize something unexpected. Perhaps meaning doesn't live in endlessness at all. Perhaps it grows from the edges, from the things that end. When we talk about the boundaries of the universe, the speed of light, the stretch of space, the slow burn of stars, we often speak with frustration. These are the walls that keep us small, the laws that hold us still. But what if those limits are not cages, but the very structure that allows beauty to exist? After all, a song without an ending would become noise. A life without duration would have no urgency. A story without limits would have no shape. In every part of nature you can see the same quiet balance. Rivers are defined not by the water they carry, but by the banks that guide them. The sky feels vast only because there is ground beneath it. Even a heartbeat means nothing without the stillness that separates one pulse from the next. Boundaries are not the opposite of freedom. They are the frame that makes freedom visible. The Milky Way, with all its billions of stars, is our frame. We dream of escaping it, but perhaps we misunderstand its purpose. Its spiral arms are not bars of a cage. They are arms of light, gathering everything that belongs here into a single pattern. Every planet, every orbit, every creature ever born under its glow is part of that pattern, a detail in its slow and endless swirl. To live inside it is to be written into a story too large to finish, but just small enough to feel. We sometimes imagine that to be great we must go farther, to cross the horizon, to leave the familiar behind. But sometimes greatness lies in the opposite direction, in staying, in understanding, in caring for what's within reach. The boundaries that surround us are also invitations. They say, here is where you can act, where you can love, where you can learn. Beyond them the laws change. Inside them meaning blooms. Even time, our most intimate boundary, carries its own quiet grace. We often wish for more of it, to live longer, to see farther into the future. Yet it's the finiteness of time that makes every moment precious. A sunrise means more because it doesn't last. A life feels vivid because it has an end. In the vast scale of the cosmos, human time is barely a spark, but it's a spark that knows itself, and that awareness turns it into something eternal. When you think about it, every form of beauty depends on limits. The curve of a shell, the orbit of a moon, the pattern of frost on glass, all are born from laws that say, this far, no farther. Infinity alone is sterile. It's the boundary that allows structure, the pause that creates rhythm, the silence that lets a note be heard. Without contrast, even light would lose its brilliance. For centuries we've chased infinity as if it were the ultimate freedom. We built telescopes to see farther, equations to reach deeper, engines to go faster, and each time the universe revealed more, but it also revealed more boundaries. It's almost as if it enjoys the game, giving us glimpses of infinity. but always reminding us that we are finite, and perhaps that's not a punishment, but a conversation. Infinity creates life's stage, and finitude writes the script. Imagine for a moment that you could step outside the galaxy and look back. You'd see the Milky Way as a soft spiral of light, spinning slowly in the dark, its edges glowing like embers. From that distance, you might realize that everything you've ever known, every life, every song, every story, fits inside that single swirl. To know that is not to feel trapped, it's to feel held. The galaxy is not something we must escape. It's something we belong to, and belonging, when you think about it, is another kind of boundary. To belong is to be shaped by where you are, by gravity, by memory, by connection. It doesn't make you smaller, it gives you roots. Even the stars, those symbols of freedom, are bound by their own limits. They burn because they are contained. Their light exists only because the gravity holding them together keeps their fire from tearing itself apart. A star without limits wouldn't shine, it would explode. Boundaries don't extinguish light, they make it possible. So maybe, in the end, the beauty of boundaries is that they make us whole. They keep us from dissolving into the vastness. They let us focus, build, and love within the space we're given. The Milky Way, with all its distances and silences, might not be our prison, but our cradle. A quiet room in which life can unfold safely before the rest of the universe goes dark. There's a strange peace in realizing that we don't have to chase infinity to find meaning. We can find it right here, in the finite, in the familiar pull of gravity that keeps our feet on the ground, in the warmth of sunlight that took 8 minutes to reach us, in the limits of a single heartbeat, measured against eternity. These are the boundaries that shape our days, the quiet reminders that we belong not to everywhere, but to somewhere. The galaxy's arms will go on turning for billions of years, with or without us. Stars will rise and fade, dust will gather into new suns, and life, perhaps, will find its way again. Our role isn't to master that pattern or to break free from it. Our role is to notice, to see the beauty of the frame while we're still inside it. So, as you close your eyes tonight and think of the stars above you, remember that you are not outside their story. You are written into it, line by line, heartbeat by heartbeat. The boundaries that surround you, of space, of time, of body, are not barriers. They are the universe's way of holding you gently, saying, "Here, this is enough." And from that stillness, from that quiet acceptance, our story will drift once more, back to where it began. To the spiral arms that cradle us, to the stars that remember us, and to the soft light that has always meant home. And so, our long journey through distance and silence, through possibility and loss, finally circles home. The spiral of the Milky Way stretches around us once more, not as a boundary to resist, but as a cradle of light. When you picture it now, those sweeping arms glittering like rivers of dusted silver, it no longer feels like something we're trapped inside. It feels like something that holds us, not bars of a cage, but arms of light. Hello there again, traveller. You've drifted through time and theory, through warmth and quiet. You've seen galaxies fade and stars reborn, and the fragile persistence of life finding ways to continue. You've stood at the edge of everything and looked back, and now you return to this single, steady galaxy that has always been enough. The Milky Way is not just a place, it is a rhythm. Every atom of your body was made from its long breath, from the ashes of stars that lived, burned, and gave themselves back to the dark. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen in your lungs, all of it was once starlight. You are quite literally a small fragment of the galaxy learning to wonder about itself. When you look up at the night sky, the gaze goes both ways. You see the galaxy, and the galaxy through you sees itself. It's easy to imagine that the universe is indifferent, that it expands without meaning, that stars burn without care. But perhaps meaning is not given by the stars themselves, but by those who notice them. The moment you look up, the cold light becomes something warm. It turns from energy into story. You give it context, emotion, memory. In that sense, the universe doesn't need to care. It has already delegated that task to you. We will likely never leave the Milky Way. The distances are too great, the energy too immense, the speed of light too constant a companion. Beyond this galaxy, space stretches faster than we could ever cross. But that isn't a failure. It's the universe's gentle way of saying, stay. This is enough. Our home is not small. 400 billion stars, each with worlds, each with its own soft glow, enough wonder to fill every lifetime that will ever exist. You could spend your entire life looking at one corner of the Milky Way and never exhaust its beauty. There are star nurseries, vast clouds where new suns ignite, glowing pink and blue. There are globular clusters where ancient stars huddle close together like embers in a fire. There are regions of darkness, dense dust lanes that look like gaps in the sky, but are really places where a new creation waits unseen. There are neutron stars spinning like lighthouses and gas giants whose colours shift like dreams. The galaxy is not static, it's alive, in its own slow, immense way. And within that slow motion, we find our scale. We're not the masters of it, nor the centre. We are the momentary awareness passing through it, a small ripple on a sea of billions. But small does not mean insignificant. A single note may be brief, but it still completes the melody. Existence needs every sound it creates, even the faintest one. In the end, maybe the purpose of all this exploration, the stars, the equations, the endless listening, is not to find escape, but to learn reverence, to realise that the galaxy does not need us to leave it, because it already gives us everything: air, warmth, gravity, meaning. To be alive inside it is to live inside a miracle so large it doesn't even notice its own generosity. Think of the galaxy as a great slow clock made of starlight. The arms sweep around its centre once every 200 million years. During a single rotation, entire species are born and vanish, continents shift, civilizations rise and fade. We are a blink in that motion, and yet, for that blink, we are aware of it. That awareness is what turns existence into history, what turns time into experience. So, when you next look up, try to see the Milky Way not as a path to leave, but as a home that asks only one thing of you: that you stay awake to its beauty. The stars will keep moving slowly, quietly, as they always have. The same gravity that binds them together binds you too. You are not adrift, you are held. There's comfort in that thought, that even in a universe built on distance, connection still wins. Gravity, light, memory. These are the gentle threads that keep everything woven. The boundaries we've traced are not walls, but patterns. The silence we've feared is not absence, but space enough for meaning to grow. The galaxy doesn't imprison you. It holds you steady, like a hand cupping a flame against the wind. And when, one night, you find yourself standing beneath the stars, feeling that familiar ache of wonder and smallness, try this. Close your eyes. Listen. Somewhere, above and within, the Milky Way is humming. A sound too deep for ears, a vibration felt through being. The same hum lives in your heartbeat. The rhythm is identical. You and the galaxy are not separate. You're two sides of the same slow, endless song. Even when your eyes grow heavy and thought begins to drift, that song continues. The stars keep turning. The arms of light keep circling, not forever, but long enough. You don't need to travel to other galaxies to find the infinite. You already live inside it. It's folded into every atom. every breath, every gentle thought. So rest now, beneath this familiar sky. The universe doesn't need you to reach it. It only asks you to feel it, to notice, to exist. The Milky Way will keep you safe while you dream. It has been doing so since before there were names for anything at all. Close your eyes. The stars will keep moving, slowly, quietly, as they always have. You are part of their pattern, and they are part of you. The night will hold you, and when the morning comes, you'll carry a little of that starlight back inside your waking world, a reminder that you have already travelled far enough. And maybe that is the final lesson of the galaxy, that home was never a place you had to reach. It was the space between every heartbeat, the warmth of a single world, the silence filled with meaning. The Milky Way doesn't need to be escaped. It only needs to be loved. Good night, traveller. You're already home.